Chapter 1. The Affair of the Shadowed Necklace. I have always considered myself fortunate to accompany my dear friend Hercule Poirot on his extraordinary investigations. Yet nothing in my modest life as Captain Hastings could have prepared me for the strange case that unfolded one evening at the opulent Beaumont Manor. The house stood atop a gentle rise overlooking the silver ribbon of the Thames, its windows twinkling against the gathering dusk like watchful eyes. I arrived by motor car shortly after 6, summoned by a terse telegram from Poirot himself. "Mon cher Hastings, your presence is required forthwith, urgent and delicate." I found Poirot in the library, pacing before a pair of tall French windows. He was dressed in his usual immaculate fashion, a charcoal grey suit, perfectly starched white shirt, and a black bow tie tied with mathematical precision. His moustaches were waxed to formidable points, yet his expression was unlike any I had previously beheld. There was an almost theatrical gravity about him, as though he were preparing to conduct a dark symphony. "Mon ami," Poirot greeted me, pausing mid-stride and offering a dramatic inclination of his head, "you arrive just in time to witness an affaire des plus singulières." Before I could reply, a drawn gasp drifted to us from the grand corridor. We followed the sound to the drawing-room, where Lady Beatrice Beaumont, the lady of the manor, reclined on a chaise longue, pale shifts of fear dancing in her eyes. On the small satin-covered table beside her lay an exquisite necklace of black onyx beads interspersed with minute diamonds. The Shadowed Necklace, a family heirloom said to carry a curse of secrecy. "They have taken it," she whispered, her voice quivering like a wounded bird. "Vanished before my very eyes." "And you saw whom, madam?" Poirot asked gently, but with an intensity in his eyes that made even the firelight seem to bend toward him. Lady Beaumont shivered, drawing her silk wrap closer. "I was admiring it, as I often do when this evening's guests arrived. Sir Lionel, Fairchild, Mr. Emerson of the Bank of England, Miss Violet Claiborne, and—" She faltered, glancing past Poirot, "and Mrs. Marguerite Delacroix, the celebrated pianist." Poirot's brows rose imperceptibly. "All respected persons, n'est-ce pas?" "Indeed," Lady Beaumont replied, "yet all with a reason to covet the necklace. Lionel, well, you poor recall his debts. Emerson is forever lecturing me on the family's financial imprudence. Violet is engaged to Lionel, and Madame Delacroix, she admires beautiful jewellery almost as much as she admires her art." I caught Poirot's eye. He inclined his head, signalling that the usual deductions were at hand. The air in the room felt charged, as though electricity lurked behind each polished surface. I, too, was struck by the tension already simmering among the assembled dinner guests. We conducted a quick survey of the scene. The drawing-room door bore no signs of forced entry. The heavy draperies remained undisturbed, and the small display stand on which the necklace had rested was intact. Only the thin silver chain, once secured to the stand, dangled empty. Poirot touched it with a gloved fingertip and murmured, "Ah, the thief was most adroit. No struggle, no snapped links, nothing but empty air." One by one, he invited the guests to recount their locations and actions when the theft occurred. Sir Lionel Fairchild hovered in a corner, his fine clothes rumpled and his cheeks flushed. He claimed to have been fetching a brandy from the sideboard. Mr. Emerson insisted he had excused himself to make an urgent phone call in the adjoining conservatory. Miss Claiborne, serene but watchful, was reading the label on a decanter of sherry, while Mrs. Delacroix professed to have slipped away to practice a nocturne in the music-room. I noted their expressions: Lionel's furtive glances, Emerson's nervous thumb-twitch, Violet's slight tightening of her lips, and Marguerite's dreamy air of detachment. Yet none displayed the overt anxiety I would have expected from a thief caught in the act. Each had something to hide, Poirot observed quietly, and yet none wished to betray more than the barest fragment of truth. As the stationary clock on the mantelpiece emitted its sonorous strokes, Poirot's little grey cells appeared to whirl behind his calm facade. He uttered not a word for a heartbeat, then spoke softly. "Hastings, I believe the thief is among us, but I also believe we must treat this not as a vulgar burglary, but as a crime of the mind, a puzzle crafted to reveal the deepest fears and desires of these worthy people." He turned to Lady Beaumont. "Madame, allow us to examine each room in turn, but I beg you, do not allow any of your guests to leave the house until we comprehend the full measure of this affair." Her nod was a silent concession. In the hush that followed, only the crackling fire dared to break the stillness. I observed Poirot lean closer to the fallen silver chain. His keen eyes studied its minute scratches and the faint trace of what might have been a fingerprint. He straightened with renewed purpose. "Impossible, you say? Perhaps," he murmured to me. "Yet every apparently impossible thing becomes possible once one knows the secret." He raised his gaze to the assembled guests. "Let us proceed, mes amis, and discover that secret together." As we turned toward the door, I felt the first stirring of unease. There in the grandeur of Beaumont Manor, among polished baccarat, vases and portraits of stern-faced ancestors, a simple string of black onyx had succeeded in turning polite society into a den of suspicion. Little did I realize that before dawn broke on that same night, more than one life would be irrevocably changed, and Poirot's brilliance would guide us through horrors far deeper than the theft of a necklace. Thus it was that the affair of the Chiu shadowed necklace began, an affair of shadows, secrets, and the profound mysteries of the human heart. Chapter 2. The First Clue. I rose before dawn the following morning, restless with curiosity and anticipation. Through the tall windows of Beaumont Manor's guest wing, a grey light filtered over dew-laden gardens. Over breakfast in the dining-room, Poirot was characteristically silent, sipping his tea with the utmost deliberation, while Lady Beaumont and her guests exchanged uneasy pleasantries. The household staff moved like spectres, eyes cast downward, as though the theft of the shadowed necklace had cast a pall over every soul in the house. Once the table was cleared, Poirot beckoned me to join him in the drawing-room. The empty chain still hung from its polished stand, and Lady Beaumont hovered nearby, trembling ever so slightly as she watched us. Poirot knelt beside the display, gloved fingers hovering above the silver links. "Observe, Hastings," he murmured. "The chain is not broken nor stretched. It was unfastened with care, an artful removal made by one who knew precisely how to handle such delicate metal. But that is not all." He pointed to a tiny chip at the base of one onyx bead. I knelt to look. and sure enough, a fragment of black stone had flaked away, leaving a narrow fissure as though struck by a fine wire. "A singular detail," Poirot continued. "One seldom notices the strength required to lever a bead from its setting. It suggests the thief applied pressure at a precise angle, possibly to hide the crack. But why leave such a flaw? It tells us that the thief did not plan to keep the necklace long. They expected someone would examine it closely." Lady Beaumont gasped. "Then you think that the necklace wasn't taken for sale or ransom, but to be shown, to make a statement, perhaps to force confession?" Poirot rose, brushing imaginary dust from his lapel. "Let us proceed to the conservatory. There, under a dome of glass and trailing vines, Mr. Emerson had been found making his so-called urgent telephone call. Yet the mahogany telephone table bore faint but distinct smears of a pale lavender powder. Emerson, with his austere attire and clipped manner, regarded Poirot with thinly veiled annoyance. "I told you, monsieur, I was dialing London to verify alone," he said stiffly. Poirot bent to inspect the powder. "Lavender, yes, not the perfume of Madame Delacroix, nor of Lady Beaumont, but the scent reserved for the evening's talcum powder, found in the ladies' dressing-rooms." He sniffed delicately. "A curious trace indeed, monsieur. You must have brushed against someone, though you deny entering those rooms." Emerson's lip twitched. "I never denied. I only said I made a call." "With your feet?" Poirot corrected, pointing to the floor. There, beneath Emerson's polished shoes, I noticed tiny specks of earth from the garden. Yet no one had reported him leaving the room. Emerson flushed. I stepped outside for a moment to clear my head." "Excellent. Then you will show us the path you took." Still uneasy, he led us through the maze of ferns to a small side door into the rose garden. There, in the soft soil, were 2 footprints in evening shoes, one too large for Emerson's slender feet, the other of a woman's sandal heel. The print trailed toward the greenhouse before fading. Back in the drawing-room, Poirot summoned Sir Lionel and Miss Claiborne. Lionel, whose signature charm now seemed strained, failed to meet Poirot's gaze. Violet's face remained impassive, though her hands trembled as she clasped a handkerchief. "As you both know," Poirot began, "you claim to have been attending to the drinks table, yet a decanter of sherry dropped its label this morning. A slip of paper found beside it bears your initials, Violet, but in handwriting not your own." Miss Claiborne opened her mouth to protest, then closed it, biting her lip. Poirot held up the torn fragment. "VC to LF. Remember our tryst at—" He let the words hang in the charged air. "A curious memory, oui? Except the date and place are missing. Someone wished to implicate you, mademoiselle, or to divert our attention from the real misdeed." Violet's composure cracked for an instant, revealing a flicker of anger. "You think I wrote that? Not you, but someone who knows your secret, and wished our suspicions to follow a false path." Sir Lionel's sneer masked deeper unrest. "Whatever game you play, monsieur, the whole household is weary of it." Yet Poirot only smiled. "On the contrary, it is the game that will win us the necklace." Our final stop was the music room, where Mrs. Marguerite Delacroix had performed her nocturne. The Steinway lay open, its keys still gleaming under the pale morning light. On the music rack, A single black hair was pinned beneath the score, long and lustrous, clearly not the thin, wiry hairs of Lady Beaumont. Marguerite drew near, confusion in her grey eyes. "But I have sombre auburn hair," she said, touching her coiffure. "Precisely my point." Poirot held up the hair. "One often forgets that a single strand can betray the most careful impostor. This hair does not belong to you, madam, nor to any of the other ladies here. It belongs to someone who wore a different coiffure, perhaps a wig, during the theft." Marguerite's breath caught. "Are you suggesting someone disguised themselves?" "Exactly so." Poirot laid the hair beside the chip of onyx, and they used misdirection to occupy our attention, the suggestion that the crime was driven by passion, by jealousy, or by financial desperation. But the true motive lies deeper. He paused, surveying the four suspects as though weighing each in the balance. "We have a mysterious chip, a false letter, foreign powder, contradictory footprints, and a displaced strand of hair. All are pieces of a puzzle deliberately scattered. We must discern which is red herring and which is vital clue." Lady Beaumont drew a shallow breath. "Can you tell me who took my necklace?" "As yet, no," Poirot said quietly, "for we have, too, many false trails. But I have already begun to arrange these scattered pieces in the order that reveals their meaning." He turned to me. "Mon cher Hastings, see to it that none of these suspects meets privately, nor leaves the grounds. We'll begin formal interviews shortly." Outside, the dawn deepened into morning. Inside, a house of elegant rooms and polished manners held a thief who toyed with reputation and fear. Each guest, with their own secret, wore an invisible mask. But as Poirot's little grey cells hummed with possibility, I sensed that the first clues, though bewildering, marked the faint outlines of a deeper truth, one that would only reveal itself to the most patient and perceptive mind. And so, amid scratched gems and scattered hairs, the next phase of our investigation took shape. The game was afoot once again, and I, Hastings, could only marvel at the subtlety with which the master detective wove his deductions, preparing to unmask not just a common thief, but the hidden darkness in the hearts of Beaumont Manor's esteemed visitor. Chapter 3. The Gathering of Suspects. As the morning sun climbed higher, casting warm shafts of light through stained glass panels, Poirot assembled Lady Beaumont and her 4 guests in the oak-panelled drawing-room. The air was taut with unease. Each person took a seat as though stepping onto a stage. I stood near the window, notebook in hand, ready to record every nuance. Poirot began with his customary flourish, hands clasped behind his back. "Mes amis, we are now at a stage where each of you must present your own account of your relationship to the shadowed necklace and to one another. Only by understanding these linkages can we untangle the web of deception." Lady Beaumont, seated centre stage, smoothed her silk skirt. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot, I will say again that this necklace has belonged to my family for generations. It symbolises our lineage. What it means to lose it is almost beyond description." She paused, her eyes briefly moist. "My great-grandmother wore it at her wedding. It has been at every important event since. That it should vanish under civil company, I fear my reputation." Sir Lionel Fairchild leaned forward. His expensive watch glinted on his wrist. "My dear Beatrice, you know I would never betray your trust. My debts are known, yes, but it was not financial need that brought me here tonight. I confess, I admired the necklace, admired it deeply, but I would not stoop to theft. Violet Claiborne glanced at Lionel, then turned to Poirot. Sir Lionel is correct. He may be foolish with money, but he is nothing if not honourable where you are concerned, Lady Beaumont. My engagement to him depends on his integrity as much as on my own. Her fingers toyed with the lace at her collar. Yet I too loved this necklace. It was to be my dowry, shared with my future husband. How cruel that we shall have no heirloom for our wedding portrait. Mr. Emerson cleared his throat. I am merely the family's banker. I advise Lady Beaumont on prudence and investment. I confess my tone may be harsh, but never cruel, and I certainly would not risk my professional standing by stealing from a client. Marguerite Delacroix, draped in a velvet shawl, closed her eyes as though auditioning silence. I admire fine art and exquisite jewels both, but I hold little use for heirlooms, which often represent burdens rather than beauty. It is the creative spirit I cherish, not coldness of stone. Poirot held up a gloved finger. Madame Delacroix's perspective is intriguing, yet it reveals a potential motive, the desire to possess the aesthetic, to liberate the jewel from the weight of family history. If this theft were an act of artistic liberation, it would fit with her temperament. Marguerite's lips curved as though tasting a secret. She did not deny the thought. Poirot then beckoned me forward. Hastings, would you be so good as to distribute these character sheets I prepared based on our private conversations? I handed each person a sheet summarizing their background, relationships, and known grievances. Sir Lionel's noted his gambling debts, Violet's the pressure of societal expectations, Emerson's pride in his profession, and Marguerite's restless creativity. Lady Beaumont received a sheet noting her fear of scandal. Poirot addressed the group. Mes amis, peruse these documents. They contain nothing you have not already told me, yet sometimes seeing one's own words in print can reveal hidden contradictions. As they read, Poirot studied each face. Lionel's eyes darted. Violet's expression hardened. Emerson's jaw tightened. Marguerite's gaze softened, almost wistful. The subtle emotional responses told more than their spoken statements. When all had finished, Poirot tapped the sheet before Lady Beaumont. Madame, you describe your anxiety that your social standing may crumble if this necklace is lost, but social standing can survive scandal, if one handles it deftly. You feel something more than mere reputation is at stake. She glanced away. You imply I have secrets beyond my lineage's prestige? Poirot merely nodded. I ask only that you consider why the shadowed necklace holds such power over you. Does it symbolize something personal? Perhaps a promise made and broken? Lady Beaumont's face flickered, but she fell silent. Turning to Sir Lionel, Poirot said, Sir Lionel, your gambling troubles are well known, yet you describe your debt as a mild irritation. When one gambles, is it not because one seeks more than wealth? Perhaps a thrill or affirmation? Lionel laughed nervously. You speak of psychology, monsieur, rather more intricately than I would have expected of a detective. Ah, but human psychology is my métier, Poirot replied. And sometimes the greatest crimes arise from desires we hardly confess to ourselves. He moved to Violet. Miss Claiborne, you speak of expectations and appearances. A woman in your position must reconcile her private desires with her public role. Were you willing to sacrifice appearances to secure your future? She lowered her gaze. Only the foolish would do so. She paused, then said in a brittle voice, I would not steal to save my reputation, yet I might do other things I would not frankly admit. Marguerite Delacroix drummed her fingers on her shawl. Monsieur, you probe deeply, but you have as yet not touched the heart of the matter. What about the bond between sisters, lady? Beaumont and her late sister, mother to Violet. The grief has never left this household. The necklace passed as a memorial to the departed child. Could grief be motive? Silence fell. Poirot fixed his delicate gaze on Marguerite. An intriguing suggestion. The weight of grief can indeed warp judgment. And if one sought to avenge or honour a departed soul, one might employ dramatic gestures. Emerson cleared his throat. There can be no justification, artistic, psychological, or otherwise, for theft. Poirot smiled, unfazed. On the contrary, monsieur, there can be, though whether that justifies the act is for others to decide. What matters now is that we understand every motive. As the assembled guests offered no further commentary, Poirot turned to me. Hastings, please observe how each suspect reacts when their deepest motivations are suggested. These reactions, not their words, will guide us. I noted the subtle shift in Sir Lionel's posture, his shoulders tensing at any mention of debt or pride. Violet's trembling breath when grief and expectation were alluded to. Emerson's flicker of annoyance at psychological analysis. And Marguerite's quiet satisfaction at intellectual insights. Poirot concluded the session. We shall reconvene at this time tomorrow for formal interviews. Until then, mes amis, you may reflect on what you have revealed, and I shall reflect on what I have observed. As the guests departed, Lady Beaumont lingered. With a soft sigh she said, Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. You make us confront truths we wish to deny. He nodded. Precisely, madame. Only by confronting the truth can we find it. Once the room was empty, Poirot turned to me. Hastings, we have cast a wide net tonight, covering grief, ambition, passion, pride, and artistry. The thief is adept at such diversions, hoping we will pursue every false lead. But in each misdirection lies a trace of reality. Tomorrow we shall narrow the field. I closed my notebook, feeling the weight of the tangled emotions we had just sifted. The gathering of suspects had revealed much, yet also deepened the mystery. Who among these four would yield to confession? Who would remain silent until the moment was ripe? And what other surprises awaited in the labyrinthine corridors of Beaumont Manor? The game continued, and Poirot's little grey cells were already at work, illuminating possibilities as deftly as morning light dissolves shadows. Chapter 4. Poirot Arrives. The late morning hush in Beaumont Manor was broken only by the soft ticking of the grandfather clock as I joined Hercule Poirot in the great hall. Outside, a gentle breeze set the honeyed roses to trembling, their petals brushing against the windows like tentative whispers. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with expectancy. The suspects were gathered for a formal inspection of the scene, and interviews were to commence at once. Poirot, impeccably dressed as ever in his pale grey morning suit and starched collar, paused before the heavy front door and allowed his keen gaze to survey the assembly of suspects. He extended a gloved hand to steady himself on the carved oak banister. "Hastings," he declared in his precise French accent, "observe well. The first impression of the detective is as important as the first impression of a suspect. One must see all, reveal nothing. Lady Beatrice Beaumont, Sir Lionel Fairchild, Miss Violet Claiborne, Mr. Emerson, and Mrs. Marguerite Delacroix stood in a loose semicircle at the foot of the grand staircase. Each bore the invisible weight of suspicion upon their shoulders. Lady Beaumont's countenance was drawn, though she held herself with quiet dignity. Sir Lionel shifted his elegant cane from hand to hand, jaw clenched. Violet's posture was rigid, her eyes darting. Emerson's arms were folded tightly, and Marguerite's gaze drifted dreamily about the room. Poirot tapped his cane twice on the marble floor. "Mes amis," he began, his voice smooth and commanding, "we meet again, 24 hours since the grievous disappearance of the shadowed necklace. We have collected clues scattered like petals in a storm, but now that storm must calm," swept one small hand toward the drawing-room beyond. "We shall reconstruct the events as they occurred, step by step, and in so doing we shall dismiss the official theory, which I judge to be, how shall I say, un peu trop hâtive." He paused for effect. "The investigators who first arrived postulate that the theft was the act of an amateur opportunist, perhaps a housemaid or a passing visitor unnoticed, but I submit to you that they are wrong." A murmur passed among the suspects. Sir Lionel raised an eyebrow. Violet's lips parted slightly. Emerson's brow twitched. Marguerite's eyes sparkled with mild amusement. Lady Beaumont's grip tightened on her shawl. Poirot smiled serenely. "Why, mes amis? Because the chain bears no marks of clumsy handling. The chip in the onyx reveals calculated force. The lavender powder suggests deliberate misdirection. And the false letter—" He held up the torn fragment as if it were an exquisite coin, "was formulated by someone educated in the art of deceit, one who understands how the human mind clings to the first narrative offered." He motioned with a flourish. "Let us, therefore, ignore the superficial theory and attend only to facts." Turning to Lady Beaumont, he asked, "Madame, will you accompany me to the drawing-room to revisit the chain's display? I wish to show our guests precisely why the official conclusion fails." Without waiting, he led the procession through the arched doorway into the drawing-room. There, the empty pedestal stood like a mausoleum, an unspoken witness to the crime. Lady Beaumont approached and gently touched the silver chain dangling from its hook. Poirot knelt beside it and peered closely at the tiny chip. "Behold," he said, indicating the fracture point with a fingertip, "the precise angle at which force was applied. One must rotate the bead by exactly 90 degrees before levering it away. Otherwise, one risks breaking the chain. The thief knew this, and therefore knew the anatomy of the necklace intimately." He rose and faced the assembled five. "Is it probable that a common housemaid, unfamiliar with such jewellery, would possess that knowledge? Il est impossible." Sir Lionel cleared his throat. "Certainly not, but someone—" He stopped as Poirot turned to him. "I think, Sir Lionel, you mean someone within these halls, someone whose fingers have caressed the necklace before this night." someone who may have handled it with care and admired its craftsmanship many times. Poirot's gaze lingered kindly yet piercingly on Lionel. And who among us has done so? Lionel's face paled. Violet stepped forward, hand on his arm. Poirot allowed the interruption, then resumed. But that is only one reason to dismiss the official theory. The lavender powder, mes amis, is not the perfume of an evening gala. It is the talcum used by Lady Beaumont in her dressing room. He raised his eyebrow, watching Emerson blink. Emerson stepped back. Admittedly, I erred in suggesting that was perfume. I did not realize the powder belonged to the ladies. Poirot inclined his head. Nor did I, when I first observed it. But the scent lingers where it should not, on the telephone table in the conservatory. Thus, the thief must have brushed past someone wearing night garments, or accessed the dressing room under cover of darkness. He paused for a moment, then smiled, and yet no maid reported her absence. Marguerite pursed her lips. So we discard the notion of an outsider. We must look only among ourselves. Poirot nodded. Exactement. An outsider could not have engineered such elaborate misdirection without access and subtlety. The thief is one of you five, and if the official investigators cling to their theory of a common crime, they will overlook the vital truth. He motioned for us to reconvene in the billiard room, where he had laid out his analysis of timelines and room layouts. The suspects followed, subdued by the breadth of Poirot's certainty. Once inside, Poirot tapped a small table, displaying a rough map of the manor's ground floor. Mes amis, he said, pointing to the map, here are the routes taken by each of you at the hour of the theft. The official report aligns each to their purported location. Yet, I ask you to note, the shortest corridor from the drawing room to the dressing rooms requires passing directly by the billiard room, which our maid swears was unlocked and empty. He turned to Violet. Miss Claiborne, you claim to have been at the decanter, yet 2 witnesses place you in the billiard room shortly before 10. How do you explain that? Violet's cheeks flamed. I went there to practice my dance steps for tomorrow's recital. I did not wish to disturb the others. Poirot's eyes twinkled. A plausible excuse, but whether true, we cannot yet say. Note, however, that during those minutes we have no account of your whereabouts. Meanwhile, the electricity in the billiard room flickered, an event traced to faulty wiring. One might think that a fortunate coincidence, except the electrician was summoned only this morning. Sir Lionel pressed his lips together. Surely that is irrelevant. Poirot let the protest stand unanswered. He pivoted to Lady Beaumont. Madame, you maintain you were in the study reviewing letters. Yet the study shows no indication of recent activity, no open pastry crumbs, nor fresh ink on the blotter. Did you, perhaps, leave the room in haste? She shook her head. I cannot think that I left the room. Indeed, Poirot murmured to himself, stroking his moustaches, which suggests your memory is less certain than you believe. Finally, he regarded Emerson. Monsieur, you insist you conducted your call well away from mischief. Yet the telephone line you used was rerouted yesterday through the music room. A most curious change, would you not say? Emerson's gaze wavered. I had no knowledge of that rerouting. Perhaps not consciously, Poirot said gently. But you knew the layout of the lines, or someone told you. An intricate knowledge for a banker. He turned back to us, Hastings included. You see, mes amis, The official theory is rotten with assumption. We must examine each fact, each movement, each hesitation, as if it were a chess piece. Only then shall we corner the true culprit. He snapped his fingers as though conjuring a revelation. The game is afoot, but only on the board of true facts. And mes amis, he addressed the five, until I have finished gathering those facts, none may leave until the cast is complete. Comprenez-vous? Nods of assent followed, some reluctant, some eager. As the suspects exchanged uneasy glances, Poirot turned to me and whispered, "Hastings, our path is now clear. We dismiss false theories. We trust only what we observe, and deduce. This afternoon we begin the initial interviews in earnest." I felt a thrill of excitement. Under Poirot's firm guidance, the investigation shed its surface trappings and plunged into the realm of precise reasoning. The elegant facades of Beaumont Manor's inhabitants had been stripped away, revealing the hidden machinery of motives and opportunities. And at the centre, poised like a master conductor, stood Hercule Poirot, ready to draw out the truth with his little grey cells. The game resumed, more challengingly than ever before. Chapter 5. Initial Interviews. Begin by late afternoon, the soft light in Beaumont Manor had shifted to a muted amber hue, lending the drawing-room an almost sepulchral air. Poirot had arranged 5 chairs in a precise semicircle, each for the suspects in turn, while I took a seat just beyond, notebook open. A servant stood discreetly in the corner, ready to deliver refreshments but otherwise invisible. Poirot rose and addressed the group. "Mes amis, the first stage of our inquiry requires private conversations. Each of you will speak with me in turn. I ask only truth, though you may choose the words you give. You need not worry about politeness. This is a matter of the intellect." He turned first to Sir Lionel Fairchild, whose restless elegance now seemed overshadowed by genuine apprehension. "Sir Lionel, you will be first. Please join me." Sir Lionel swallowed and followed Poirot into the adjacent study. I remained to observe the reactions of the 4 left behind. Lady Beaumont sat with her hands folded, lips pressed in a thin line. Violet Claiborne cast furtive glances at the door. Mr. Emerson stood pacing. Marguerite Delacroix reclined, eyes dreamy but alert. Within moments Poirot returned alone. He gave no sign of his conversation beyond a slight tightening of the jaw, an indicator I knew that something of interest had emerged. He beckoned Mr. Emerson forward, whose stern facade now appeared strained. The banker exchanged a trembling glance with Marguerite, then followed Poirot into the study. Again silence reigned. When Poirot re-emerged, his little grey cells seemed to whirl visibly behind his calm exterior. He nodded to Violet, whose face paled, and motioned her to enter. Finally, Lady Beaumont and Marguerite took their turns. After the last interview, Poirot summoned us all back to the drawing-room. He poured each suspect a glass of chilled chamomile tea, a subtle sedative to steady nerves, and handed me a cup. I could almost taste the lavender undertones. Poirot seated himself at the head of the semicircle, eyes bright with anticipation. "We have now gathered information from each person's perspective," he began. "I will share with you the essence of what I have learned, though not yet the full conclusions. Each of you will listen, for your reactions will supply further clues." He looked to Sir Lionel. You, monsieur, spoke of your debts as though they were a trivial matter, something to be solved by tomorrow's table. Yet when I suggested that perhaps you sought more than money, that you sought validation, you hesitated. In truth, you have wagered large sums to feel the thrill of risk, not merely to balance your ledgers. Lionel's hand trembled around his teacup. I admit, I love the game itself, he said in a low voice. The rush of near defeat, but I would never steal to satisfy that craving. Poirot raised a finger. Perhaps not for yourself, but opportunities arise when one's self-control falters. Keep that thought. He turned to Emerson. Monsieur le banquier, you value precision and order above all, yet you confessed that you once diverted funds briefly to cover an unexpected obligation, an action you later reversed. It was a momentary trespass, yes, but it reveals willingness to bend rules under pressure. Emerson's composure cracked. It was an error of youth, he protested. Long ago. Errors of youth can linger, Poirot observed, and surface again under duress. Violet Claiborne's lips whitened when Poirot addressed her. Mademoiselle, you described your engagement as a matrimonial partnership, bound by duty and affection. Yet you revealed that on the eve of your wedding day, you feared cancellation if scandal arose. When I suggested that the necklace might secure your future, your eyes betrayed you. The thought was not abhorrent. Violet covered her eyes momentarily. I meant only that security matters, she whispered. I did not mean harm. Marguerite Delacroix smiled faintly as Poirot spoke to her. Madame, your devotion to art is genuine, yet you confessed to feeling stifled by tradition. You spoke of liberation, your desire to free the necklace from its burdens. You did not deny the idea when I placed it before you. Marguerite's gaze softened. I meant only an homage, a theatrical gesture, she said, not real theft. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Theatrical indeed, yet the necklace vanished, did it not? Finally, Lady Beaumont leaned forward when Poirot addressed her. Madame, you told me that the shadowed necklace embodies your family's honour. Yet you admitted a secret wish to atone for past wrongs, past betrayals within your lineage. The necklace is both a burden and a penance. Lady Beaumont's voice quavered. Yes, I wished I could discard it to break free of ancestral sins, but I would not steal from myself. Poirot rose and paced before the group, hands clasped. You see, mes amis, each of you harbours a motive. Passion, pride, fear, rebellion, grief. None admit to physical theft, yet each admits to an inner theft of peace, of honour, of dignity. The real thief manipulated these hidden longings. He paused to let the weight of his words settle. But motive alone does not a crime make. We must consider opportunity, disguise, and cunning. He walked to the fireplace and pressed a hidden latch. A panel slid aside, revealing a small cabinet with a single drawer. Poirot extracted a leather-bound folder and placed it on a side table. In our interviews, I presented each of you with hypothetical scenarios. Phrases like, imagine if you could vanish the necklace, all covertly recorded by Hastings here. He gestured to me, and I handed over my notebook. Poirot flipped through the pages, eyes scanning rapidly. He looked up and addressed the group once more. Note how each of you responded to the same phrase. Some with excitement, some with horror, some with rationalization. Those responses, cross-referenced with your body language and words, produce a matrix of truth and falsehood. He tapped the leather folder. Inside, you will find transcripts and observations, purely factual. I suggest you review them tonight, alone. Reflect on your reactions. The criminal among you will realize that continued denial is futile, and the innocent will see that they must trust in the truth. Sir Lionel rose, his face ashen. You intend to force a confession? Poirot inclined his head. Not force, but invite. The mind that holds the secret also holds the key to reveal it. When the time is right, mes amis, the confession will emerge of its own accord. He turned to me. Hastings, see that each is left alone with their thoughts. No gatherings, no conversations. We will resume tomorrow at first light. As the guests departed in stunned silence, I noted the haunted looks in their eyes. They carried within them our triangular interviews, the spoken word, the unspoken reaction, and Poirot's probing insight. I glanced at Poirot, whose gaze lingered on the flickering flames. The game deepens, Hastings, he said softly. We have drawn out motivations and weaknesses. Tomorrow we shall corner our thief. I nodded, realizing that the first interviews had peeled back layers of civility and politeness to expose raw human desire. The next phase would demand precision greater still. But with Poirot's brilliance, I trusted that little grey cells would illuminate the path. The collision of motive and method drew nearer, and the masked thief quivered on the brink of exposure. Hey, Dick! Chapter 6. First False Lead. The following morning dawned grey and drizzly, as if the heavens themselves conspired to mirror the solemn mood within Beaumont Manor. Poirot and I convened early in the billiard-room, where yesterday's map lay spread upon the green baize, along with hastily scribbled notes. The suspects, summoned one by one, stood waiting in the anteroom, their faces heavy with expectation. Poirot tapped his fingers together. Hastings, today we embrace a careful misdirection. We shall follow the most obvious suspect. Yes, the one whom all would assume guilty, only to reveal that truth often hides behind the commonplace. I nodded. The first false lead, then? Exactement. Poirot turned to the steward who lingered at the door. Ask Sir Lionel Fairchild to join us, s'il vous plaît. Sir Lionel entered, his customary confidence tempered by visible anxiety. He bowed stiffly. Monsieur Poirot, you wished to see me. Poirot gestured to a chair. Please sit, Sir Lionel. I have been reflecting upon our conversation, and upon the evidence we have gathered. He paused, raising one gloved hand. I propose a demonstration. It will illuminate not only how the necklace could have been taken, but also why suspicion naturally falls upon you. Lionel's eyes narrowed. Me, monsieur? Poirot smiled benevolently. Allow me. He rose and fetched from the sideboard a small black velvet pouch containing a replica necklace, crafted for precisely this purpose. He placed it gently on the table. Observe the technique required to remove a bead without breaking the chain. With deft precision, Poirot rotated one onyx bead and applied slight pressure, sliding it free. Sir Lionel leaned forward, watching every movement. Incredible! Yet I see no difficulty. Ah, but you see, Poirot murmured, the force must be applied at a very specific angle, and with the left hand stabilized while the right exerts pressure. He demonstrated again, this time handing the replica to Lionel. "Try it if you please." Lionel swallowed and took the necklace. His fingers shook slightly as he attempted the maneuver. After 2 awkward tries, he succeeded in levering a bead free, but in doing so, he scratched its surface. He gasped. Poirot retrieved the bead and examined it under the gaslight. It bore a fine, shallow gouge, identical in character to the chip in the real necklace. Voila! You have recreated the exact flaw we observed. He looked steadily at Lionel. One might conclude that you, having practiced the removal, left such a mark during the theft. Lionel's face blanched. "But I never practiced, monsieur. I simply—" His voice broke. Poirot leaned in. "Yes, Sir Lionel, you did. I surmise that you, driven by desperation, practiced on this replica you acquired, perhaps from a jeweller's model, hoping to perfect the technique before daring the deed." Lionel's voice was hoarse. I purchased no such replica." "Ah," Poirot said softly. "You are certain? Or does the gasp you emitted when I first demonstrated the removal indicate a deeper familiarity?" He paused, letting the accusation hang. At that moment, Violet Claiborne burst into the room. She clutched a folded sheet of paper. "Monsieur, Poirot, I found this in the conservatory." She handed it to the detective. On the sheet was a crude sketch of the manor's ground floor, annotated with arrows and circles around the dressing room, the billiard room, and the drawing room. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A plan?" he observed. "And here—" He traced a path with his finger, the route to the safe where the real necklace was displayed. He turned the paper to Lionel. "This sketch, Sir Lionel, identifies the path you purportedly never took. Yet it is here, in your handwriting, is it not?" Lionel's face twisted. I drew nothing." Poirot tapped the sketch. "But you did, mon ami. The style of the lettering, the slanted L, it matches the letter you wrote to Lady Beaumont yesterday. He produced that letter. The handwriting matched exactly." Sir Lionel trembled, his shoulders sagging. I confess, I drew that sketch in frustration last night. I intended to show Violet where we might hide the necklace, not to steal it." Poirot inclined his head. "But the very act of drawing that plan indicates criminal intent, no?" Lionel's eyes filled with tears. "I meant only a game. One we would play to embarrass Lady Beaumont, to show how foolish such heirlooms are. I never intended to actually remove it." For a heartbeat, the room lay silent. Then sirens wailed in the distance, summoned, no doubt, by the local inspector, alerted by rumours of Sir Lionel's implication. The clerk of the court arrived, prepared to take Lionel into custody. Violet rushed to her fiancé's side, crying, out in protest. Poirot raised a hand. "Stop!" His tone was steely. The clerk hesitated. "This, mes amis, is our first false lead. Everything we have staged, the demonstration, the handwriting, the sketch, was designed to ensnare the obvious suspect." Lionel's tears fell, relief and shame mingling on his face. You believe me innocent?" Poirot gazed at him with pitying eyes. "I believe you a poor gambler in more ways than one, gambling with your dignity and our goodwill. Yet I also believe you lack the cold resolve required to execute such a theft under scrutiny." He turned to the clerk. Monsieur, refrain from detaining Sir Lionel. The true culprit remains at large. The clerk murmured his assent, lowering his notebook. Outside, the persistent drizzle tapped the windows. Violet embraced Lionel, sobs of relief trembling through her. Poirot addressed the group. Observe how easily we ensnared ourselves by focusing on the most glaring motive. Sir Lionel's debts and his trembling resolve made him appear guilty. Yet the real thief would not expose himself so transparently. The true criminal acts with cunning, weaving misdirection so that suspicion falls elsewhere. He stepped forward and retrieved the sketch, tucking it into his coat. Let this lesson guide us, mes amis. The straightforward path is often a rug laid out by the criminal to cover the true exit. Henceforth, we shall pursue subtler clues, the ones not beckoning for attention, but whispering in the quiet corners. As Sir Lionel and Violet withdrew, hand in hand, to recover from their ordeal, I sensed the collective exhale of tension. The first false lead had been spectacular, yet brief. In its wake lay the sobering knowledge that our investigation would demand greater subtlety and depth. Poirot closed the billiard-room door and turned to me. Hastings, we have taught our suspects and ourselves a lesson in misdirection. Now we must seek the genuine thread that binds motive and opportunity without such flamboyant display. I nodded, my own resolve steeled. The case had shed its most obvious suspect, but the shadows only deepened. And in those shadows, I trusted, Poirot's little grey cells would discover the path to the truth. Chapter 7. The Psychological Game. Late that afternoon, a hush settled over Beaumont Manor's drawing-room as the servants placed a delicate tea-tray before Hercule Poirot and myself. The sky beyond the mullioned windows loomed slate-grey, and the gentle patter of rain against the glass seemed to underscore the tension within. We had dismissed Sir Lionel as a false lead, yet the air remained thick with suspicion. Poirot signalled for the other 4 suspects to join us: Lady Beaumont, Miss Claiborne, Mr. Emerson, and Mrs. Delacroix, each summoned under the guise of a modest refreshment before dinner. They entered in turn, bearing the weight of fresh uncertainty. Lady Beaumont appeared pale but composed. Violet's eyes were bright with determination. Emerson's posture betrayed irritability. Marguerite Delacroix moved with a languid grace that contrasted sharply with the taut expressions of the others. Poirot poured tea, chamomile for me, Earl Grey for Lady Beaumont, and a soft Darjeeling for the rest, and placed a cup before each guest. Mes amis, Poirot began, his voice honeyed yet carrying an edge of steel, we have come thus far by examining facts and motivations. But now I propose a more delicate approach: the psychological game. We shall engage in conversation, and through our dialogue, I will observe the subtleties of your reactions. Each nuance, gesture, hesitation, inflection reveals more than words alone. He sipped his tea and set down the cup with a poised flourish. I will pose a series of hypothetical situations, each linked to the shadowed necklace's fate, and you will respond as frankly as possible. There will be no need for formalities. Speak freely. Hastings will note your words, but I shall note your souls. Lady Beaumont's lips trembled. Such games, are they necessary? Ah, but the mind is its own theatre, Poirot replied, warmly. Only by glimpsing your inner performances can we discern the true plot. He turned first to Marguerite Delacroix. Madame, imagine you found the necklace abandoned in the rose garden this morning. What would you do? Marguerite's grey eyes widened, and she drew a slow breath. I would examine it, of course, note its condition, its beauty, then bring it to Lady Beaumont. It is not mine to claim. She paused, her gaze drifting to her teacup, as though weighing an unseen thought. Yet, if I admired it enough, I might linger over it in memory, keep its radiance close to my heart. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Interesting? Not theft, but a possessive longing. He tapped his chin. And how long, madam, would that longing last before you confessed to the discovery? Marguerite held his gaze. Until the temptation to hold it privately became unbearable. Only then would conscience or fear compel me to speak. He inclined his head and glided to Violet. Mademoiselle Claiborne, suppose you heard rumours that the necklace had been sold to pay your fiancé's debts. How would you react? Violet stiffened, fingers clutching the teacup's handle until her knuckles whitened. After a moment's silence, she said, voice low, I would be furious, betrayed by everyone I trusted. I would demand proof, investigate the buyer, and if necessary, fight to reclaim it. Her eyes darkened. And if I found proof that the sale had occurred without my knowledge, I would see every conspirator held accountable. Poirot offered a small smile, a protective possessiveness. On one hand, loyalty, on the other, suspicion. Thank you, mademoiselle. He turned to Mr. Emerson. Monsieur, imagine an acquaintance confides that the necklace contains secret documents, letters revealing scandalous affairs of the Beaumont family. Would you advise Madame to destroy the documents, or to publish them for profit or blackmail? Emerson's eyes flickered and his stiff composure wavered. He cleared his throat. If those letters threaten to ruin an innocent reputation, they should be destroyed. But if the truth must come out to protect the public interest, then publication is justified. He paused, as though surprised by his own equivocation. Of course, one must weigh profit against principle. Profit against principle, Poirot repeated softly, as though savouring the words. Thank you, monsieur. Last, he faced Lady Beaumont. Madame, suppose the necklace is recovered, but you learn your own beloved sister orchestrated its disappearance to teach you humility. Would you forgive her? Lady Beaumont's tea trembled in her hand. Her eyes glistened. A sister's love should forgive all, but I fear betrayal runs deeper than charity. I would wish to forgive, yes, but reconciliation would require a confession, repentance, and the rebuilding of trust over many seasons. Poirot inclined his head with sympathy. Forgiveness earned, not given blindly. Thank you, madame. He set down his teacup and rose, pacing slowly before the group. Mes amis, each of you responded candidly, yet your responses carry hidden tremors. Marguerite, you admitted to cherishing the necklace privately before revealing it. Violet, you would launch an investigation fueled by rage. Emerson, you balance destruction and publication as if both were plausible. And Lady Beaumont, you spoke of betrayed trust and long repentance. He paused, letting silence swirl around us like a gathering mist. These hypothetical reactions mirror the truths you most wish to conceal. For the real thief, the question is not whether you would take the necklace, but how you would live with its aftermath. Poirot cast his gaze upon Marguerite. Your love for art may drive you to secret possession. He shifted to Violet. Your devotion to Lionel inclines you toward protective retribution. He turned to Emerson. Your sense of justice warps toward control, managing reputations as one would manage accounts. Finally, to Lady Beaumont, and you, haunted by ancestral sins, might have sought to break the cycle, to remake your family's narrative by disappearing the necklace, only to reappear with moral vindication. The four continued to meet his gaze, each unblinking in their own way. Poirot sank into his chair and steepled his fingers before his chin. We have played the psychological game, but the true mastermind is not the one who reacts most profoundly. To hypotheticals, it is the one who remains silent where silence breeds suspicion. He turned to me. Hastings, what say you of these reactions? I reflected on each response. Marguerite's was wistful, Violet's was fierce, Emerson's was conflicted, Lady Beaumont's was sorrowful. All volatile, yet none, but one, perhaps, held a calm centre. I looked back at the group. Marguerite, Violet and Emerson all trembled, but Lady Beaumont maintained a steady voice, even as her hand shook, but her resolve never faltered. Poirot nodded approvingly. Just so, that steadiness amid turmoil is the hallmark of guilt cloaked in dignity. A guilty person attempts control of self, control of perception. He rose again. We shall observe these dynamics in our next encounter. Until then, reflect on the disquiet stirred by our game. He signalled the end of the session. The suspects rose with hesitant bows and withdrew to their respective quarters, each carrying the memory of Poirot's probing questions. The rain intensified outside, drumming on the leaded panes like urgent footsteps. Once they were gone, Poirot turned to me with a triumphant smile. Hastings, we have noticed tremors in the hearts of all, but we now know the thief is one who can mask those tremors with a calm facade, like a conductor directing chaos without breaking a sweat. I nodded, the weight of his insight settling in my mind. The psychological game had revealed not only raw motivations, but the manner in which each suspect managed, or failed to manage, their inner storms. And in the eye of that storm, I sensed, lay the hidden culprit, poised to reveal themselves only when the final threads were drawn taut. Chapter 8. A Secondary Mystery. Late that afternoon, as the sky beyond Beaumont Manor's windows turned a sullen pewter, a new alarm rippled through the household. I had been taking notes in the library, quiet contemplation, following Poirot's instructions, when a shriek echoed down the corridor. Poirot and I exchanged a glance and hurried toward the sound, passing anxious maids and servants who clutched, their aprons to their breasts. We arrived at the conservatory door to find Miss Claiborne kneeling beside a wrought-iron table. Violet's hands trembled around a porcelain teacup, from which a thin wisp of steam curled, unusual at this hour. Lady Beaumont stood to one side, hand pressed to her mouth, eyes wide. Marguerite Delacroix hovered near the door, and Emerson's stern features were drawn tight with concern. "What is it? What has happened?" Poirot demanded, bending to examine Violet. She looked up, pallor draining from her cheeks. I took a sip of my tea, and my throat, it burned. Then I felt dizzy, and I dropped the cup. She pointed to the noxious-looking liquid pooled on the tray. "It tastes bitter, like almond." Emerson stepped forward. "Bitter almond? That suggests cyanide." His voice broke the hush, and Lady Beaumont gasped. Marguerite's eyes darted to the tea-urn. "But I prepared all the tea. I used the best Darjeeling leaves." She bit her lip. "I did not add anything." Poirot placed a steady hand on Violet's shoulder. "Madame, remain still. Hastings, fetch water, and tell Benson to bring the doctor at once." I dashed off without delay, heart pounding. Moments later, we were back with cold water and a physician summoned from the nearby village. He surveyed Violet with professional calm, listening to her pulse and examining her pupils. After a tense pause, he pronounced, "She has ingested a small dose of cyanide, enough to cause severe symptoms, but not fatal, provided we proceed at once." He administered an emetic and a protective serum, then departed with urgent instructions to monitor Violet closely. As the doctor's footsteps receded, Poirot rose and addressed the group. "Mes amis, our inquiry has taken an unexpected turn. There are two mysteries now: the missing shadowed necklace and an attempted poisoning. We must consider that these events are connected, an effort by the culprit to sow confusion and divert our attention." Sir Lionel, who had arrived in time to witness the commotion, stepped forward. "But who would poison Violet? It makes no sense. She cannot be the thief. She was the innocent fiancée." Poirot's eyes glittered. "Ah, but poison is the tool of desperation. To silence a witness, or to force a confession, or to punish suspicion. We must examine opportunity." He turned to Lady Beaumont. "Madame, was the tea prepared here in the conservatory?" She nodded. "Yes, Marguerite brought the urn and brewed the batch." Poirot looked at Marguerite. "Madame Delacroix, you handled the urn, yet you said you added nothing unusual." Marguerite's hands rose defensively. "I swear, monsieur, I added only tea leaves and water. I would never harm Miss Claiborne." Emerson interjected. "Lady Beaumont, did you observe anything? Any other persons entering the conservatory?" Lady Beaumont hesitated. "Only the gardener, planting bulbs in the far corner, and Mrs. Delacroix. No one else." Poirot furrowed his brow. "And the urn? Where was it before the tea was served?" Violet, still trembling, whispered, "In the kitchen. I helped bring it in." "Then someone in the kitchen could have tampered with the urn before Marguerite delivered it." Poirot turned to Emerson. "Monsieur, you commission many dining events. Did you change any staff assignments today?" Emerson blinked. "Yes, I asked young Benson to assist in the kitchen, since the butler was unwell. But no one else." Poirot nodded. "We shall question Benson, but first let us secure the urn and its contents." He motioned to the servants, who quickly sealed the urn in its brass stand and carried it away. When the urn had vanished, Poirot led the remaining guests into the drawing-room. "I propose that we treat this poisoning like any other clue. Observe reactions, examine opportunities, and piece together contradictions." He offered seats to Lady Beaumont, Emerson, and Marguerite, while I stationed myself near the door to observe. "Mes amis, I will ask you each the same question. Where were you between 3 and 3:30 this afternoon? And who can confirm your whereabouts?" Lady Beaumont spoke first, her voice still shaky. "I returned to my study to review letters. Belinda, My maid accompanied me. She will confirm. Poirot made a note. Very well. Monsieur Emerson. Emerson cleared his throat. I walked in the rose garden, supervising the planting of camellias by Mr. Stonewell, the gardener. Poirot nodded, writing swiftly. And Madame Delacroix? Marguerite's eyes softened with regret. I was in the music room, practicing. Chopin for tomorrow's recital. Stevens, the housemaid, heard me play. Poirot looked to me. Hastings, please step outside and fetch Benson and Belinda for questioning. Also Mr. Stonewell and Stevens. We shall verify these accounts. I departed. Poirot turned to the three-seated figures. Note, mes amis, that the poison was almond-scented cyanide, an elegant crystalline powder. It dissolves quickly in hot water, leaving no visual trace. Such a substance could be carried in a small vial, concealed easily by someone accustomed to discretion. Lady Beaumont shivered. Who among us would carry such a thing? Poirot's gaze was steady. The person who foresaw the possibility that someone might incriminate them, someone who planned not only the theft, but also the cover-up. The secondary crime serves to unsettle and discredit any emerging narrative that might reveal the necklace's fate. Before Lady Beaumont could respond, I returned with the staff. Benson, Belinda, Stonewell, and Stevens, summoned by trembling summons, stood before us. Poirot questioned each in turn, patiently eliciting their accounts. Benson confirmed delivering the urn to Marguerite in the kitchen and recalled no unusual request. Belinda vouched for Lady Beaumont's presence in the study. Stonewell attested to Emerson's presence in the garden. Stevens corroborated Marguerite's musical practice. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. All alibis hold, yet one must have had access to the urn in the kitchen. Now, he lifted a folded cloth from the table, revealing a small sugar bowl. This, mes amis, I found among the teaspoons when investigating earlier this morning. Note the subtle pinkish stain on its rim. Lipstick, though not Lady Beaumont's pale rose, nor Violet's coral, but a deeper crimson. He looked at Marguerite, whose brow creased, and here, he tapped the sugar bowl. We find a trace of ammonia scent, indicating that someone rinsed something acidic, perhaps cyanide, from nearby surfaces. The sugar bowl and the urn stood side by side in the kitchen, yes? Marguerite's eyes flickered. Yes, I used that sugar bowl for afternoon tea. Poirot's gaze shifted to Emerson. Consider this. Cyanide, delicate vials, a kitchen, and a banker accustomed to handling chemicals for photographic development. Could you have supplied the chemical? Emerson's jaw tightened. Brum, snapped. I have no such chemicals in my possession. Poirot gave a small, inscrutable smile. Perhaps, yet the alibi for the urn's arrival rests on Marguerite's peaceful trip from kitchen to conservatory, and the sugar bowl suggests someone handled both sugar and poison. Who among us has the rationale to mask poison as sugar's companion? He paused, letting his words resonate. At that moment, a muffled sob echoed from the hallway. Violet, supported by Sir Lionel, paused at the doorway. Poirot's gaze softened. Mes amis, the household now stands upon two mysteries. One, the vanished necklace. Two, the attempt on Miss Claiborne's life. We must assume both stem from the same criminal mind. He steepled his fingers. Tomorrow we shall pursue the theme of hidden connections. For now, reflect on who could manipulate both objects and persons with equal ease. As the group dispersed, Lady Beaumont clutching Marguerite's hand, Emerson retreating to his study, I sensed the manor itself holding its breath. The secondary mystery had woven a darker thread through our inquiry, binding the fate of the necklace to Violet's ordeal. And at the loom's centre stood Poirot, poised to trace each strand to its source, certain that the true culprit's next move would reveal more than they intended. Chapter 9. Hidden Connections. Late that evening, after the household had withdrawn to uneasy rest, Poirot summoned me to the library once more. A single lamp burned upon the desk, casting long shadows across the spines of leather-bound volumes. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth carried in from the rain-soaked gardens. "Mon cher Hastings," Poirot began, his little grey cells already alight, "it is time to examine the hidden connections among our suspects, the threads that bind them beyond mere acquaintance." He unfolded a fresh sheet of parchment and placed it on the desk. "We have considered motive, opportunity, and misdirection. Now we must uncover relationships that neither fact nor confession can fully reveal." I nodded, settling into a chair, as Poirot lit a cigarette, its smoke curling like an inquisitive question. "Our first task," he said, "is to map the social and financial ties among Lady Beaumont, Sir Lionel, Miss Claiborne, Mr. Emerson, and Mesdames Delacroix. We must look for overlaps in their histories, moments when their paths have crossed without public notice." He tapped the parchment. "Consider this. Sir Lionel's debts are significant, yet he has no obvious benefactor. Who, then, stepped in to clear the balance of nearly £2,000 last autumn?" I frowned. "Lady Beaumont's banker, Mr. Emerson?" "Precisely." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Emerson arranged a discreet loan through an offshore trust, one that appeared as a donation to the Beaumont estate, though no correspondence bears Lady Beaumont's name." He leaned closer. "And who recommended that trust? Lady Beaumont herself during a dinner at Delacroix House, Madame Delacroix's London residence." I leaned back. "So Marguerite introduced Lady Beaumont to Emerson's financial services?" Poirot nodded. "Yes, yet Marguerite's stated interest was artistic patronage, funding her concerts and gallery exhibitions. Odd, then, that she should facilitate a banking connection for her hostess." He tapped the desk again. "Next, the connection between Violet Claiborne and Marguerite Delacroix. Both women studied at the Conservatoire de Paris, though at different times. Marguerite mentored Violet in technique during Violet's summer sojourn in France." I raised my eyebrows, but Violet never mentioned that link. "Because it is not publicly known. Violet's genteel family would obscure any association that smacked of bohemian artistry." Poirot exhaled smoke. "Yet that mentorship explains how Marguerite felt comfortable moving about the manor unobserved. She knew the layout from previous visits. My mind traced the implications. And perhaps Marguerite had access to the dressing room earlier, when Lady Beaumont retrieved her talcum powder." "Exactement." Poirot smiled. "Now, consider Lady Beaumont's hidden connection to Sir Lionel. They share a past indiscretion in Geneva, a duet at the Casino de Montreux in 1922, documented only in a discreet file held by Lady Beaumont's late sister." I whistled softly. "That would explain Lady Beaumont's anxiety and the unspoken tension with Lionel. Poirot's gloved hand tapped the blank parchment. Finally, the subtle link between Mr. Emerson and Madame Delacroix. Both are patrons of the Royal Society of Chemistry's annual gala, where poisoning demonstrations are held for educational purposes. Emerson funded the event. Marguerite attended to secure publicity for artists. I shivered. So Emerson acquired cyanide through legitimate channels, and Marguerite observed its handling. "Oui," Poirot said. "The perfect confluence. Financial ties, artistic patronage, clandestine mentorship, and a taste for chemical knowledge. Each suspect shares hidden strands that converge at Beaumont Manor." He folded his hands. But which of these connections points to the thief? The one who orchestrated misdirection and an attempted poisoning? Poirot rose, walking to the tall window. Beyond, the manicured lawns and rose gardens lay shrouded in darkness. The culprit is the one who manipulated these connections to create opportunity. They needed access to the replica necklace and knowledge of its construction. The kitchen, urn and cyanide, the dressing room talcum powder, the floor plans, the alibis of others as cover. He turned, eyes bright as embers. Marguerite had mentorship access and knowledge of theatre and artifice. Emerson knew chemicals. Lady Beaumont had authority in her own home. Violet had proximity as a fiancée, and Lionel had motive, debts and disgraced pride. I frowned. All five had some, and none had all, except one who engineered the overlaps. Poirot's lips curved. Precisely. Who among them could weave together art, finance, family ties, and chemical expertise? I thought back to Marguerite's remark in the psychological game, her desire to liberate beauty, then bring it back. She alone combined artistic flair with knowledge of cyanide's theatrical properties. Poison demonstrations at chemistry galas. Mrs. Delacroix's Parisian connections placed her in the inner circles of conservatoire and bourgeois salons, and she introduced Lady Beaumont to Emerson's trust, ensuring the banker owed her a favour. "Madame Delacroix," I ventured. Poirot nodded slowly. All signs point to her. Consider also the hair found in the music room. Likely not her own, but someone she wished to frame. I recalled the hair's length and texture, matching neither Marguerite's auburn locks nor Violet's chestnut waves, but perhaps corresponding to Lady Beaumont's wig or another disguise. Poirot gestured to the library table. "We shall return to the hair, the chip in the bead and the lavender powder. Each detail was placed to implicate others. But only the true culprit possessed both the motive to restitute or dramatize family burden and the means to handle a delicate gemstone, to prepare cyanide tea, to sketch floor plans, to employ talcum powder misdirection." He leaned close, voice soft yet insistent. "Marguerite Delacroix is the common denominator. She used her role as pianist to enter unseen, her patronage network to manipulate finances, her conservatoire connections to guide Violet's movements, and her gala associations to procure poison." I exhaled slowly, feeling the pieces interlock. But to what end? Was the poisoning intended for Violet as retribution, or merely to throw us off? Poirot tapped his moustache. "Likely both. By poisoning Violet, the culprit heightened emotional turmoil, ensuring attention would focus on Violet's survival rather than the necklace. And if Violet died, the bracelet's disappearance might remain shrouded indefinitely." He folded his arms. Tomorrow, at the final gathering, we shall expose her. But we must corner her first, make her believe we still hunt elsewhere. The web of hidden connections is ready to tighten. I rose, admiration and resolve brimming within me. Then let us prepare, Poirot. The grand reveal approaches. He smiled, eyes gleaming with triumph. We, Hastings, the little grey cells have found their path. Tomorrow, at the final gathering, the shadowed necklace and the secondary mystery of attempted murder will find their true home in the mind of the criminal. Outside the wind gusted, stirring the rose bushes as if in anticipation. Inside, Beaumont Manor waited, every corridor poised for the denouement, and in the hush of midnight we readied ourselves to disentangle the final hidden connection, the confession. Chapter 10. Poirot's Secret Clue. I was roused before dawn by a gentle tap at my door. A hush lingered in the corridors of Beaumont Manor, broken only by Poirot's measured footsteps. He carried with him a small leather case and a single lamp, its warm glow rebuffing the grey morning light. I followed him in silence to the music room, where Mrs. Delacroix had performed the previous evening. The grand Steinway stood sentinel beneath a crystal chandelier, its keys gleaming pale in the lamplight. Poirot set the lamp on a slender side table and drew forth from his case a magnifying glass, a slender camel hair brush, and a small crystal vial. He gestured for me to stand back. "Hastings," he murmured, "the final piece of our puzzle lies hidden in plain sight. We have traced motives, opportunities, and misdirection. But the true crime's signature remains here, in this very room," knelt beside the piano bench and lifted a corner of its leather cushion. Underneath lay a scattering of fine black dust. Poirot dipped the brush into the vial and gently swept the dust onto a glass slide. Placing it beneath the magnifier, he studied the particles with unwavering intensity. "Observe, Hastings," he whispered. "These are not ordinary soot or talcum traces. They are microscopic fragments of ebony. Wood dust from a piano's keys. Such dust accumulates only in places where hands strike the ivory and ebony in close succession." I peered through the lens. But this suggests that the stolen bead, chipped as it was, must have come into contact with the piano, bench or keys. The thief removed a bead here, not at the display pedestal. Poirot rose, pressing a gloved fingertip to the edge of the piano stand. He then tapped the drawing-room's necklace pedestal. "Compare the angles. At the display, the bead would face outward. Here, on the bench, the inner surface would bear the chip. The ebony dust lodged within the fissure confirmed the location of removal." He produced 2 small swatches of fabric, one from the display stand's velvet cushion, the other from the piano bench's leather top, and pressed them to each other, releasing a faint trace of dust onto the velvet. The bench's leather fibres hold a microscopic residue that matches the ebony dust. Our thief practiced the removal here in the music room, secure in the silence it offered. I nodded, the implications crystallizing. Only one person had both motive to make such a demonstration and free access to this room. Marguerite Delacroix. She rehearsed here daily and could linger unseen. Poirot smiled, steepling his fingers. "Just so, and consider the chip's precise contour. A tiny gouge matching the curvature of this piano's edge, where a bead might strike if mishandled. The thief did not merely pry the bead. She placed it atop the bench to steady her hand. He strode to the window, drawing aside the curtain. Outside the rain had ceased, leaving the roses washed and vibrant. We now have the secret clue that binds motive to opportunity and misdirection to method. The theft occurred here, the secondary crime, designed to distract, and the chain of hidden connections leads inexorably to one mind. I caught the glint in Poirot's eyes. Then all that remains is to confront her, preferably when she believes herself safe from suspicion. He nodded. Tonight, I shall summon the suspects to the drawing room for our final gathering. We will reconstruct the events. First the crime scene in the music room, then the poisoning in the conservatory, and finally the disappearance of the necklace. Faced with the ebony dust's testimony, the culprit will have nowhere left to hide. He pocketed the vial and slid the brush into his case. Hastings, see to it that none of the suspects leaves the grounds before our meeting. This day must pass without further incident. And you, rest now, for you will need your wits about you tonight. As I closed the music-room door behind me, I felt the tension tighten in my chest. Poirot's secret clue had revealed not only where the crime was committed, but also who had the skill and opportunity to commit it. In the days of our partnership, I had seldom seen him so assured, and seldom anticipated a reveal so rich in poetic justice. Beaumont Manor prepared for its denouement, and tonight, under the steady hand of Hercule Poirot, the final threads of deception would unravel, exposing the mind games and psychological machinations of the thief enlightened by the light of truth. Chapter 11. Tensions rise by mid-afternoon. Beaumont Manor hummed with a charged energy that set every polished surface to shimmering with anticipation. Whispered conversations drifted through the corridors. Worried speculations about Violet's recovery. Nervous queries regarding the whereabouts of the shadowed necklace, and furtive glances exchanged among the suspects. Even the servants moved, with a subtle haste, as though carrying invisible missives of alarm between the great rooms. In the library, Poirot sat near the window, legs crossed and hands folded, watching the manicured lawns glisten from the recent rain. I joined him, notebook in hand, prepared to record the slightest shift in the household's atmosphere. "Hastings," Poirot murmured, "now that I have uncovered the pivotal clue, it is essential to let tensions rise among the suspects. They must unsettle each other, reveal their alliances, and expose the divisions that betray guilty conscience." I nodded. "Shall I arrange for them to meet, then?" Poirot's lips curved. "Indeed. Assemble them in the drawing-room under the pretext of reviewing the day's events. But let us withhold mention of the music-room's secret. Instead, we allow the undercurrents to articulate themselves." I stepped into the hallway and summoned Lady Beaumont, Mr. Emerson, Mrs. Delacroix, and Miss Claiborne to meet in the drawing-room at 4 o'clock. Each arrived with a different expression. Lady Beaumont serene but pale, Emerson stiff and watchful, Marguerite composed yet guarded, Violet still fragile, leaning heavily on Lionel's arm. Poirot greeted them crisply. "Mes amis, thank you for coming. We shall now recount the morning's progress and prepare for tonight's final gathering. But before we proceed, I invite you to share any observations or lingering doubts you may harbour among yourselves." A hush fell as all eyes turned to one another. Sir Lionel began, his voice steady though tense. "I admit, I remain uneasy about the poisoning. It was a sensational diversion, one that suggests premeditation of a degree beyond a mere theft. If the thief intends to escalate to violence, none of us is safe." His gaze flicked to Marguerite, then to Emerson. It might be useful to know who among us had motive to harm Miss Claiborne. Violet shivered. "I only wish to recover fully. But it troubles me that the poison used was cyanide, a rare and precise choice. Who here had both access to such, a substance and the will to employ it?" She looked at Emerson with a mixture of fear and accusation. Emerson bristled, pushing back his jacket. "I handled cyanide, yes, for photographic chemicals, but I would not risk my career, and certainly not harm a guest in this house." He turned his gaze on Marguerite. "You frequent chemical galas. You observed such poisons demonstrated. Could you have procured it?" Marguerite's lips curled in a patient smile. "Monsieur, I do attend educational demonstrations, but any chemical handled there is under strict supervision. I have neither the means nor the desire to harm an innocent." She crossed her legs, eyes coolly assessing the banker. "And you, Mr. Emerson, hold mortgages on properties worth more than this house. Why not steal for profit if you wished? Silence would suffice. No need for drama." Emerson's jaw clenched. Before he could answer, Lady Beaumont interjected, voice soft but firm. "Please, let us not accuse one another without reason. We know that someone here is guilty of both theft and attempted murder. Sounds so malignant when spoken aloud. But our quarrels serve only the criminal's plan." "Shh, mes petits. Distract us." She looked at Violet. "My dear, how do you feel?" Violet managed a grateful smile and pressed a hand to Lady Beaumont's. "Stronger, thank you. But the memory of that bitterness lingers. I cannot rest until the culprit confesses." Poirot observed in silence, his eyes flickering from face to face. Each suspect's body language betrayed internal conflict. Emerson's foot-tapping, Marguerite's deliberate tilt of the head, Violet's trembling fingers, Lionel's clenched fists, Lady Beaumont's clasped hands. Poirot raised a hand for calm. "Mes amis, your concerns are indeed valid, yet without direction we squander our energies on supposition. Let us instead consider the alliances you have formed, alliances that may mask true loyalties." He glanced at Lady Beaumont. "Madame, you stand with Miss Claiborne, protective and maternal. You have defended her repeatedly. Yet your own secrets, your past with Sir Lionel, remain unresolved. Does that bond you more closely to him, or drive you to distance?" Lady Beaumont's gaze flickered to Lionel. He stood silent. "My loyalty is to my family's honour, monsieur. Violet's well-being and my family's reputation are both precious." Poirot nodded. "Indeed, but consider this. Alliances may fracture when trust is tested by fear." He turned to Violet. "Mademoiselle, you rely on Sir Lionel's support. Yet you confessed in our first interviews that scandal could end your engagement. Does this crisis tighten your bond, or reveal deeper uncertainties?" Violet's eyes glistened. She looked to Lionel. "Of course I trust him, but after this ordeal, I wonder if our future can withstand the weight of such secrets." Sir Lionel's face darkened. "Violet, He paused, then swallowed. He offered a curt nod and looked away. Poirot then addressed Emerson. "Monsieur, you hold professional distance from these personal dramas, yet you share ties with both Lady Beaumont and Mrs. Delacroix. Which alliance safeguards you, and which provokes your envy?" Emerson opened his mouth, then closed it, brow furrowed. "I serve the Beaumont family and support the arts. My only desire is equilibrium." Marguerite leaned forward. "Equilibrium? In a house where a shadowy necklace vanishes and a guest is poisoned? Equilibrium eludes us all, Mr. Emerson." Her words, gentle yet cutting, caused Emerson to stiffen. He looked away, lips thinning as he surveyed the library shelves as though searching for escape. Poirot stood, folding his arms. "Notice how alliances bend under pressure. Each of you claims to stand with and against one another. Yet only the guilty feel no true allegiance, for guilt severs trust across all bonds." He paused. "This afternoon I have observed you, mes amis. I have listened to your accusations and your defences. The next step is to provoke the final fracture." He addressed the group. "I shall ask each of you to remain in the drawing room until our final gathering. I will visit each suspect privately, briefly, to discuss a new piece of evidence." He looked to me. "Hastings, you will accompany me, but the others must wait here." As I and Poirot moved toward the door, Marguerite caught my eye and offered a tight smile. She sat beside Emerson, exchanging a glance that seemed heavier than words. Lady Beaumont placed a comforting hand on Violet's shoulder. Lionel paced quietly by the fireplace, lost in thought. Standing in the corridor, Poirot whispered, "You see, Hastings, how tensions rise when we allow suspicions to surface among allies. Each suspect now questions the loyalty of another, and each is more isolated. It is in that isolation that the guilty mind trembles." I nodded, feeling the intensity of the moment. "And these fractures will deepen when you confront each with the new evidence?" "Precisely," Poirot replied, his voice calm yet charged. "We shall see who shudders at the thought of further scrutiny." Inside, the drawing-room held its breath. The suspects poised on the brink of revelation. The web of hidden connections now strained under the weight of their own shifting alliances. And in the charged quiet, I sensed the final movements of the game drawing near, each piece teetering toward its inevitable fall. Chapter 12. The Confrontation. The late afternoon light in the music room had a peculiar stillness, as though the air itself held its breath. The grand Steinway stood dark, its keys untouched since Poirot's secret investigation in the dead of night. I followed Hercule Poirot down the narrow corridor, our footsteps muffled by the deep pile of the runner. He motioned me into the half-darkened room and closed the door behind us. "Mon ami," Poirot whispered, "this is the moment to apply pressure where the heart is weakest. We confront Madame Delacroix, whose connection to this room is undeniable. Observe her reaction when I present the evidence that binds her to the theft." From his pocket, Poirot produced a small envelope stamped with our private cipher. He slid it into my hand. Inside are my notes on the ebony dust slide, the replica beads chip, and the hair analysis. We shall let her see that we know more than she suspects. He tapped the door lightly. "Now, Hastings." Moments later, Marguerite Delacroix entered, her usual poise tempered by uncertainty. She offered a courteous nod, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of apprehension. "Ah, madame," Poirot began, voice gentle, "I trust I do not disturb your preparations for tonight's recital." He gestured to the gleaming piano. "Your music must echo through these halls this evening." Marguerite forced a delicate smile. "Not at all, monsieur. I was merely gathering my thoughts." Her tone was soft, but her fingers fluttered against her shawl. Poirot closed the distance between them. "I have here an array of findings," he said, producing a small leather-bound notebook. He opened it to a page with a precise diagram of the piano bench. "This dust," he indicated fine black flecks, "is ebony from the black keys themselves, found within the fissure of the chipped bead, yes?" He held her gaze. "You played here, madam, and you know every nuance of this bench." Marguerite's throat bobbed as she swallowed. Of course, I spend hours rehearsing." Her voice wavered. "But I do not see how that implicates me in the theft." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Allow me to refresh your memory. The bead was removed here by you under the guise of rehearsal. You practiced the maneuver with the replica, did you not? You sought the perfect angle, much as you seek the perfect note, and left the chip as evidence of your artistry." She stepped back, her composure cracking. "Monsieur, you suggest I did this as a display, a performance?" Her breath came quickly. "Precisely," Poirot said softly. "A dramatic gesture worthy of a prima donna. But, Madame Delacroix, you are more than an artist. You are a patron, a connector of friends. You introduced Lady Beaumont to Emerson's trust, secured your own favours, and guided Violet's footsteps in the manor." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "All under the pretence of friendship, and yet you coveted the shadowed necklace more than any other." Marguerite's eyes flicked to the piano, then to the window. I admired it, yes. Its beauty speaks to the soul. But I did not steal it. Her voice was tremulous, but the tremor betrayed fear more than denial. Poirot slid the envelope from my hand and offered it to her. Inside are samples of the lavender powder found on the conservatory telephone table and the sugar bowl's pink stain, combined with your fingerprint on this handkerchief. He withdrew a pale linen square, bearing a faint smudge. They form a tapestry of guilt. Marguerite's colour drained. She reached for the envelope, her fingers brushing mine. "These are circumstantial, perhaps," Poirot said, "if you were innocent. But you are the only person who knew that the sugar bowl and the urn stood side by side in the kitchen. You alone could have transferred the ammonia scent from the bowl to the urn, masking the cyanide's aroma." He leaned in. "And only you would think to slip a foreign hair into the music room, to frame Lady Beaumont or Violet, knowing it would deflect suspicion." Her lips parted, as though to protest, but no words came. She backed toward the piano, tripping. Over her skirts, Poirot followed, unhurried, never taking his eyes off her. "You have the courage to steal beauty, madame, but not to face its consequences," he observed. "Tell me, did you intend the poisoning? Was it to silence Miss Claiborne, who might have recognized you at the dressing-room mirror?" Marguerite's foot struck the piano pedal. A discordant chord rang out, echoing in the room. She froze, then her composure shattered. "No!" she cried, voice raw. "I did not mean to. to harm Violet. The tea was meant only to frighten her, to show that the necklace's disappearance carried real peril. Poirot's eyes softened. Fear can drive people to cruel lengths, yes, but there is a line between threat and murder. He paused, then recited quietly, "Beauty liberated, burden broken." "Madam, you wrote this phrase in the margins of Violet's music score. It matches your handwriting." Marguerite's hand flew to her mouth. You saw that?" Her voice trembled with astonishment. "I thought you never looked in my possessions." "Ah, but I look everywhere," Poirot said. "I observed your furtive glance when I mentioned liberation in the psychological game. You believed that word secret." He stepped closer. "And when I asked about your gala participation, you defended it vehemently, because you needed those connections." To obtain cyanide, she sank to the floor beside the piano, tears streaking her cheeks. The envelope slipped from her hand. "I only wanted to prove that I could reclaim art from tradition, challenge the Beaumont legacy. I never wanted a darker stain." Poirot knelt to retrieve the envelope, then extended a hand to her. "The game is nearly over, madam, but the greatest crime is not the theft itself, but the destruction of trust between friends." He offered her the envelope. "If you speak now, honestly, the confession will carry some measure of redemption." Marguerite stared at the envelope, then at Poirot's earnest face. Her shoulders shook as she pressed a hand to her heart. Finally, she whispered, voice hoarse, "I will tell all, if only to lift this burden." Poirot rose, extending his arm to help her up. "Very good, madame. Soon we shall convene the final gathering, where you will share your confession in full." He stood, gazing at her with a mixture of triumph and compassion. "For now, Hastings, let us allow her a moment of peace before the public reveal." I nodded, watching as Poirot guided Marguerite to a chair near the window. Outside the clouds parted, and a single ray of sunlight struck the piano's black lacquer, illuminating the room's solemn grandeur. Amid the tensions and machinations, truth had found its voice in a sobbing admission, one that would soon ring out before all. In the hush that followed, I realized that the confrontation had not only exposed the thief's guilt, but also revealed the human fragility at the heart of every crime. And when the final chapter came, Beaumont Manor itself would bear witness to the ultimate act of justice. Chapter 13. A desperate attempt to escape late in the waning afternoon, as shadows lengthened. Through the corridors of Beaumont Manor, a hush settled over the household. Word had spread that Madame Delacroix would join the other guests in the drawing-room shortly for what Poirot termed the final singular assembly. Each suspect now waited, hearts taut, minds racing with dread or anticipation. Yet one among them, still unseen, nursed a desperate plan for flight. I was summoned by Poirot to the oak-panelled gallery overlooking the grand entrance hall. He stood by the balustrade, gloved fingers tapping a slender cane against the polished wood. His sharp eyes tracked the ornate front door, as though expecting a signal in the gilded banister's curves. "Hastings," he murmured, "be vigilant. Our culprit, now cornered by the prospect of public exposure, may attempt to escape these grounds before the formal gathering. We must forestall any such flight." I nodded, straining my ears for the faintest sound of hurried footsteps or the click of a latch. Below, the vast hallway lay quiet, save for the distant ticking of the grandfather clock and the muted rustle of a servant arranging vases of roses near the front door. Moments later, the soft click of a door drew our attention. Poirot motioned me to follow him down the staircase in near silent descent. We emerged into the hall just as the front door's polished brass knob began to turn. A slim figure slipped through the threshold. Marguerite Delacroix, her shawl pulled tightly about her shoulders. In one hand, she clutched a small leather satchel. In the other, a hurriedly folded music score bore the unmistakable inscription of her own handwriting. I stepped forward. "Madame Delacroix, please wait!" She started, as though caught in a reverie, then darted into the entrance hall with alarming speed. Her high-heeled shoes clicked on the marble floor as she worked the door, attempting to pull it fully open, it against the latch. Poirot blocked her path with a single calm stride. "Madame, I am afraid your journey ends here." Her eyes widened with panic. She glanced down the hall, empty save for the silent portraits and the flickering chandelier. With a sudden determination, she vaulted past Poirotin a fluid motion, breaking into a hurried run. Toward the servants' wing to the east, I sprang after her, calling, "Halt!" But her pace was swift, and she rounded the corner before Poirot could intercept. The corridor lay dimly lit, lined with oil paintings of Beaumont ancestors whose stern visages seemed to judge her escape. Poirot, unhurried yet inexorable, followed at a measured speed. "Madame Delacroix," he called in his most commanding tone, "you cannot flee. You are safe from harm, but not from justice." Her breath came in sharp gasps as she almost reached the heavy back door designated for deliveries. Beyond, the narrow gravel drive led to a discreet gate, likely the exit she had planned to use. With a final, desperate surge, she threw herself at the door. The handle turned. The bolt slid back. She nearly cracked it open when Poirot's long legs shot out, blocking her escape. "Stop!" he said firmly, locking the door with a single click of the deadbolt. He grasped her trembling arm. "You leave this manor only in my company, madam." Panting, Marguerite pressed her forehead against the cool wood, eyes closed. "Monsieur," she gasped, "I could not face them, not after what I have done." Poirot released her arm, but held her steady. "You did what you felt necessary, to avoid shame, yet shame cannot bar the path of truth. You must face your actions openly." Hastings arrived at the rear door, having circled the corridor. "Madame, I will fetch Mr. Benson to stand guard. No one else may pass here." Marguerite looked up, hair damp against her cheeks. "They will know I tried to escape. I will become a spectacle." Poirot's gaze softened as he offered her one gloved hand. Better to be a spectacle of remorse than a fugitive of fear. He guided her back toward the library corridor. "Come, let us return. The assembly awaits, and I shall present the facts before your departure cannot be denied." She drew a shuddering breath and allowed herself to be led away. In the hush of the servants' wing, the muted click of the back door's bolt echoed, like a final exclamation point. As we retraced our steps through the corridor, Poirot spoke quietly to me. "Note, Hastings, how desperation emerges when one perceives the walls closing in. The attempt to escape is testament to guilt, yet also to regret. A guilty conscience balks when faced with public reckoning. I nodded, scanning the silent hall. And now, Poirot, the final gathering. He inclined his head. Yes, we shall proceed with grace, though the culprit's flurry has stirred the household. Let us ensure that no further tumult distracts from the truth. Come. We walked swiftly back to the east wing, where the servants had prepared the drawing-room for the imminent assembly. Marguerite, shoulders hunched, followed behind, her satchel now removed by the butler and set aside. The stolen necklace remained carefully hidden in Poirot's own talismanic coat pocket, its shadowed jewels waiting for their public reveal. As we entered the drawing-room, the assembled guests turned in surprise. Lady Beaumont, Miss Claiborne, Sir Lionel, Mr. Emerson, and even the household staff paused in silent anticipation. Each pair of eyes tracked the group's approach. But none knew of the desperate flight, nor of its thwarting, save for Poirot and myself. Poirot swept his gaze over the assemblage, then beckoned Marguerite forward. Mes amis, there has been a brief interruption in our procedure. But now let us resume our course. The truth must emerge unimpeded by fear or flight. In that charged moment, I realized that the attempted escape had served to intensify every eye upon the culprit. No, one could now claim ignorance of the stakes at hand, and as Poirot prepared to speak, the final threads of deception quivered, soon to be drawn taut in the grandest of unveils. Chapter 14. The final piece falls into place. The candlelight in the drawing-room flickered against the ornate mirrors as the assembled company, Lady Beaumont, Sir Lionel, Miss Claiborne, Mr. Emerson, Mrs. Delacroix, and the silent household staff, waited with taut anticipation. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Every pair of eyes flicked between the polished table at the centre and the slowly approaching Poirot. He entered first, coiffure immaculate, moustaches waxed to perfection despite the day's exertions. Behind him followed I, bearing a simple tray with a small wooden box covered by a velvet cloth. Poirot set the tray upon the table and placed a single gloved hand atop the box. Mes amis, he began, his voice calm yet resonant. We have journeyed together through motive, opportunity, misdirection, and misadventure. We have seen the first false lead ensnare Sir Lionel, the psychological game reveal hidden desires, and the secondary crime of poisoning divert our gaze. We have uncovered the secret clue in the music room, and even witnessed a desperate attempt at flight. He paused, eyes sweeping the group. Yet one final piece remained elusive until now. To draw it forth, we must revisit the scene of the crime itself. He nodded to the butler, who brought forward a low stool and placed it beside the box. Poirot lifted the velvet cloth to reveal the battered display stand that once held the shadowed necklace, and, beside it, a square of fine leather, the piano bench's cushion. Observe these two objects, Poirot continued. One, the stage, of the necklace's removal at midnight. The other, the bench where the bead was pried free. They seem disparate, but in fact share a singular imperfection. He held up the stand and bench cushion in turn, tilting each towards the gaslight. The screw holes on the underside of the stand are irregular, slightly elongated, as though someone removed the velvet cover and reattached it sloppily. Likewise, the cushion's leather backing bears corresponding abrasions around its tacks. Ide tapped his cane twice for effect. The same tool was used on both. A slender awl, tipped with a tiny notch at precisely 2 millimeters in width. Such a tool is common in an artisan's toolkit. Watchmakers, miniature sculptors, and pianists who maintain their own benches. He turned to Marguerite Delacroix, who sat rigid with apprehension. Madame Yu, of all persons, would possess such a tool. A pianist values unwavering precision in her instrument's action, and may well carry the means to adjust it. Marguerite's face drained of colour. She opened her lips to protest, but no sound came. Poirot resumed. Furthermore, notice how the staining on the bench's leather matches the faint residue on the velvet stand. An infusion of boiled linseed oil, used to condition leather. This oil was present in your practice room, madam, for the restoration of older pianos. He turned the stand so everyone could glimpse the dull sheen at the tack points. Yet it was not in any other room of the manor. Sir Lionel shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and even Emerson's stern facade flickered with surprise. Poirot replaced the objects on the table and reached into his coat. With a gloved finger, he produced the missing onyx bead, now repaired, and set upon a small velvet cushion in a glass dome. Here is the chip itself, now restored. Notice how the repaired area absorbed the oil differently from the rest of the bead, accentuating the fissure's original contour. He tapped the glass gently. This evidence, combined with the ebony dust and piano bench profiling, forms the final piece of the puzzle. He turned his gaze slowly from one suspect to the next, permitting the weight of his words to settle. At last, he addressed the group as a whole. There is but one conclusion. The thief is the person who orchestrated every detail, who knew pianos, poisons, financial trusts, family feuds, and hidden corridors. The one whose artistry extends beyond music to the manipulation of human hearts and minds. Marguerite's breathing grew rapid. Violet clutched Lionel's arm, and Lady Beaumont's hand trembled upon her lap. Emerson's lips parted in quiet astonishment. Poirot raised one slender finger. Madame Delacroix, you sought to liberate beauty from tradition by stealing the shadowed necklace. You practiced the removal on the piano bench in this very room, using your leather maintenance tools. You conditioned the wood and leather, leaving linseed oil traces on both bench and stand. You introduced Lady Beaumont to Mr. Emerson's trust, ingratiating yourself with the family and securing the banker's professional goodwill. You mentored Miss Claiborne, granting you freedom within the manor and the false privilege of her confidences. You procured cyanide through your association with chemistry galas, and you used lavender talcum powder to stage the misdirection, knowing it would draw suspicion to the ladies' quarters. He paused, allowing the list to echo. Your attempted escape confirmed your guilt and your fear of exposure. Only someone who wove these disparate threads could execute such a grand design. Marguerite rose unsteadily, voice small yet defiant. Monsieur Poirot, you may assemble your evidence like a symphony, but you cannot prove my motive was anything more than admiration. Yes, I valued the necklace, but I did not intend harm beyond a symbolic gesture. Poirot inclined his head. Your own confession in our confrontation revealed your true aim, to frighten Miss Claiborne, to test the power of threat, and to ensure that your theft surpassed mere possession to become legend. Yet symbols cannot conceal malice. You admitted as much yourself. He produced a small folded note. This, found in your pocket when you attempted to escape, bears your handwriting. Art must challenge the world, even through darkness. A striking motto, yet hardly the creed of an Dieu innocent. Marguerite's shoulders slumped. She looked to Lady Beaumont. I never meant to injure your daughter." Lady Beaumont pressed a gentle hand to Marguerite's arm. "But you did, my dear, and I forgive you, though others may not." Violet's tearful gaze met Marguerite's. "You scared me beyond measure, but I know passion can lead one astray." Sir Lionel offered a tentative nod. Emerson's eyes, once hard, softened with the weight of recognition. Poirot smiled kindly. "Then justice may be tempered with mercy. But first we must recover the necklace." He turned to me. "Hastings, retrieve the necklace from my coat." I stepped forward and produced the shadowed necklace, its black onyx beads gleaming like ebony tears, the tiny diamond spaces shimmering like stars. Placing it reverently on the stand, I stepped back. Poirot surveyed the assembled group. "Let this magnificent jewel return to its rightful place, as shall trust and honour return to their proper homes, through repentance and forgiveness, where possible." He bowed gracefully to Lady Beaumont. "Madam, the shadowed necklace is yours again." Lady Beaumont rose, eyes shining with gratitude, and reached to reclaim her family's heirloom. As the weight of it rested once more upon the stand, the room seemed to exhale, releasing its held breath. Poirot turned to the gathering. "Mes amis, the game is concluded. Let truth and justice guide your hearts henceforth." With that final pronouncement, the intricate tapestry of mystery unravelled, leaving only the clean lines of justice and the delicate chords of grace. Chapter 15. The Final Gathering. By the soft glow of the chandeliers, the drawing-room transformed into a stage of solemn anticipation. Heavy velvet drapes were drawn to conceal the fading light outside, and the mantel clock ticked with measured insistence. At Poirot's direction, the servants had arranged 5 chairs in a semicircle facing the fireplace, each equidistant from the others. Between them stood the restored display stand, its empty hook awaiting the return of the shadowed necklace, and the culprit's confession. I stood just behind Poirot, who wore his customary calm expression, though his eyes gleamed with purpose. Opposite us, Lady Beaumont seated herself with quiet dignity, Violet Claiborne beside her, still tender from her ordeal, but resolved. Sir Lionel Fairchild, recovered in part from his own public embarrassment, sat between Emerson and Marguerite Delacroix. Their faces ranged from uneasy to defiant, but all wore the same tension, the knowledge that this gathering would speak truth. Poirot cleared his throat softly, and the room hushed further. "Mes chers amis," he began, his tone resonant, "you have all displayed admirable patience as we pursued a most intricate mystery. Now, at last, we gather to reconstruct the series of events that culminated in the disappearance of the shadowed necklace and the attempt on Miss Claiborne's life." He gestured to the stand. "In a moment, the necklace will return to its rightful place. But first, let us revisit each crucial moment." He moved to the piano bench cushion, now mounted on a small easel. Here is where the first critical act occurred. At approximately 9:55, the culprit entered the music room under the pretext of rehearsal. The bench cushion records, through ebony dust and conditioned leather, every touch of the thief's fingers as the bead was removed. The minute chip in the onyx corresponds exactly to the bench's edge, proving the removal took place here. Marguerite Delacroix's eyes flicked to the cushion, but she said nothing. Poirot continued. Next, we trace the bead's journey from the music room to the dressing room. The lavender talcum powder found on the conservatory telephone table indicates that after the theft, the thief brushed past Lady Beaumont's boudoir, smearing trace evidence upon their gloves. He raised a single bead mounted on a velvet cushion beneath glass. This powder was deliberately used to mislead us, suggesting female involvement, though in truth it served only to divert. He led us in a slow circle around the display stand. At midnight, the chain, secured by a small silver hook, was unfastened with expert precision. The replica necklace demonstration confirmed that only one individual had the dexterity and knowledge to achieve this removal without harm to the links. All eyes shifted to Sir Lionel, then to Mr. Emerson, then to Lady Beaumont, each gaze darting in the low light. Poirot held out the folded sketch of the manor's floor plan. Then the thief consulted this sketch, drawn earlier in frustration, but later repurposed as a guide. It marks the path from drawing room to music room, from music room to dressing room, and thence to the conservatory. He let the paper hang between them like a damning ledger of movement. Next, he touched the sugar bowl and urn, displayed upon a side table. After the theft, the secondary crime unfolded. Miss Claiborne's tea was laced with cyanide, disguised by a faint scent of ammonia, applied to the sugar bowl. This was no random act. It was intended to discredit her, to distract away from the missing necklace, and to silence any who might have recognized the thief. Emerson's mouth tightened. Violet's eyes brimmed with recollection. A hush fell. Poirot took a step back, folding his arms. We have seen how motive, opportunity, and method intertwine. We have watched alliances strain and false leads ensnare the obvious suspect. We have resisted the lure of the superficial theory and uncovered the secret clue in the music room. He paused to let the culmination of evidence settle like dust in the lamplight. Leaning forward, he addressed the group. Each of you has been implicated by your own actions and connections. Lady Beaumont's authority in her own home, Sir Lionel's debts, Miss Claiborne's proximity and devotion, Mr. Emerson's chemical expertise, and Madame Delacroix's artistic facility and hidden networks. But only one person orchestrated every facet of this grand deception. Marguerite's lips parted as though to speak, but held back. Sir Lionel swallowed. Emerson's stern features softened into concern. Lady Beaumont's tranquil facade quivered, and Violet gripped her mother's hand. Poirot's gaze, unwavering, settled on each in turn. Now, mes amis, I leave you to observe one another. In the silence, watch for the flicker of guilt, the tremor of fear, the instinct to deny or to flee. For the final confession will emerge not from my pronouncement, but from the conscience of the criminal themselves. He stepped aside, allowing the charged quiet to bloom. The only sound was the clock's patient ticking and the crackle of the fireplace. Chairs creaked as the suspects shifted, each inwardly calculating the moment ahead. Finally, Poirot spoke again, softer yet no less potent. "Speak now, whoever holds the truth, and let the shadowed necklace and this house find peace at last." That pregnant silence, every breath, seemed amplified. I watched the faces. Marguerite's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Emerson's jaw quivered. Sir Lionel's posture sagged with exhaustion. Lady Beaumont's gaze shone with hope. Violet's hand trembled upon her mother's. And then a single movement. Marguerite Delacroix rose slowly, smoothing her shawl. Her voice, though quiet, carried to every corner. It was I. The confession hung in the air, more electrifying than any accusation. As the others reeled, Poirot smiled gently and nodded. "Madame Delacroix, please join me by the stand." I closed my notebook, aware that the final reveal was at hand, but knowing that in this hallowed moment, the final gathering, justice, mercy, and truth converged beneath the watchful gaze of Hercule Poirot and the little grey cells that never forget. Chapter 16. The Reveal. A hush settled as Marguerite Delacroix's softly spoken confession echoed through the candlelit drawing-room. The restored display stand, bearing the empty hook once cradling the shadowed necklace, stood at the room's heart like an altar awaiting its offering. Poirot inclined his head in acknowledgment and beckoned her forward. "Madame Delacroix," he said quietly, "please stand beside the stand." Her silken skirts rustled as she moved, shoulders hunched against the weight of eyes upon her. She steeled herself and faced the assembly. Lady Beaumont's maternal gaze, Violet's tear-bright relief, Sir Lionel's shaken support, and Mr. Emerson's constrained stare. Poirot turned to the assembled guests. "Mes amis, you have witnessed every step of this labyrinthine affair. Now that the culprit has spoken, let us trace the path of the crime, from inception to disclosure." First addressed the music room. At 9:55 the previous evening, Madame Delacroix entered here, claiming rehearsal. But she lingered at the piano bench until the household retired. Using a slender leather awl from her pianist's toolkit, she pried a single onyx bead at a precise 90-degree angle, leaving the telltale chip. The ebony dust she brushed into the fissure betrayed the location, a secret revealed only by microscopic analysis. Marguerite swallowed, but did not interrupt. Poirot continued. She then concealed the chipped bead in her leather satchel, intended for no sale, but for dramatic return. She replaced the cushion and reattached the velvet cover to the stand, leaving minute linseed oil stains where the tacks had been loosened. He moved to the dressing-room corridor. Passing Lady Beaumont's private chambers, she carried residue of lavender talcum powder on her gloves. That powder was traced to the conservatory telephone table, suggesting a feminine presence. Another misdirection. Poirot held up the floor-plan sketch. Madame Delacroix bore this sketch, originally drawn by Sir Lionel in a moment of pique, but appropriated by her to guide her steps. Drawing room, music room, dressing rooms, conservatory. He allowed the eyes of the group to absorb the implication. He then indicated the urn and sugar bowl. At 3 o'clock, she seized an opportunity to heighten confusion. In the kitchen, she laced Miss Claiborne's afternoon tea with a measured dose of cyanide. The sugar bowl bore faint ammonia scent, an attempt to mask the bitter almond hint and implicate an acidic contaminant. Her aim was not to kill, but to frighten, to distract attention from the necklace, and perhaps to silence any who might question her movements. He glanced at Violet. Miss Claiborne survived thanks to swift intervention. Yet the attempt sowed panic, drawing officers away from the real crime. Poirot paused, letting the assembled guests reflect on the breadth of her design. Then he turned to Marguerite directly. Madame Delacroix, tell us in your own words, why orchestrate such a spectacle? Marguerite raised her gaze, voice trembling but clear. I believed beauty must break free from stifling tradition. The shadowed necklace, bound by antiquity and family burden, deserved to be liberated, shown that art transcends history. I wished to perform a grand gesture, to astonish the world and then return the jewel, triumphant and unscathed. Poirot watched her keenly. And yet you underestimated the darkness such theatre could unleash. Fear is a powerful instrument. You played upon it like a virtuoso, yet did not anticipate the pain you'd inflict. He gestured to Lady Beaumont and Violet. Two innocent hearts were nearly broken. Lady Beaumont rose, compassion shining through her grief. Marguerite, I forgive you, for the love of art, and for your human frailty, but forgiveness does not excuse the method. Marguerite bowed her head in gratitude, tears glistening. Sir Lionel and Emerson exchanged solemn nods. Even Emerson's usual reserve gave way to empathy. Poirot returned his attention to the physical evidence. Let this final piece be indisputable. The missing bead itself. He reached into his coat and produced the restored onyx bead under glass. Holding it, aloft, he traced the repaired fissure with a gloved fingertip. See how the curvature matches the piano bench's edge. No other surface in this manner could produce such a notch. He placed the bead upon the velvet cushion, and thus the shadowed necklace returns whole, as shall our peace of mind, as far as possible after such a trial. Poirot signalled, and I stepped forward to retrieve the necklace from the stand, draping it once more around Lady Beaumont's neck. As the onyx bead settled against her throat, a murmur of awe and relief swept the room. Lady Beaumont's composure broke into a tender smile. Violet pressed close to her mother, and Sir Lionel offered a small, proud grin. Marguerite bowed deeply, humility painted across her features. Poirot set aside his cane and addressed the group one final time. Mes chers amis, the affair concludes not only with the recovery of a precious heirloom, but with lessons in mercy and the perils of unbridled passion. May you all carry forward the wisdom gained here, and may the shadowed necklace henceforth remind you that beauty untempered by empathy can wound as much as it enchants. He turned to Marguerite. Madame, the authorities will take the necessary steps. I trust you will face them with courage. Marguerite nodded, voice soft. Yes, Monsieur Poirot, I have much to atone for. Poirot smiled gently. At one moment, the world is a stage. At another, it is a school of character. Consider this your lesson, learned at great cost. He swept his hand toward the group. Let us adjourn, mes amis. The shadowed necklace is restored, the truth unveiled, and justice awaits its course. Tonight, we dine in gratitude, even as tomorrow unfolds the remainder of our responsibilities. As the guests rose and the tension ebbed into exchanged embraces, I stood beside Poirot, witnessing the final transformation of fear into forgiveness. The manor's grandeur seemed softened by the flicker of candlelight, as though reflecting the dawn of clarity that followed the storm of deception. And thus, the reveal complete, we looked ahead to the final chapter, where justice would be served, wounds bound, and the delicate balance between retribution and compassion reaffirmed. Chapter 17. Outcome and Justice. The hush that followed the final gathering lingered long into the evening, as if Beaumont Manor itself drew a breath of relief. After dinner, an étagé, unhurried repast of poached salmon and delicate petit four, Poirot requested one last audience with the household, convening all in the grand library. The storm that had threatened the day passed in silent dismissal, leaving the windows clear and the moonlight silvering the rows of books. Lady Beaumont, resplendent in the restored shadowed necklace, sat near the hearth. Violet Claiborne, recovered and composed, was at her side. Sir Lionel Fairchild hovered protectively, while Mr. Emerson and the servants took seats further back. Marguerite Delacroix, escorted by the local inspector summoned at Poirot's behest, stood in quiet resignation with her hat in hand, the satchel of her belongings placed beside her. Poirot rose, his countenance suffused with solemnity. Mes guides, chers amis, mes chers convives, we gather at the close of this affair not simply to mark the recovery of a treasure, but to witness the administration of justice tempered by compassion. He nodded to the inspector. Inspector Morton, if you please. The inspector, a plump man with keen grey eyes, stepped forward and acknowledged the company. Hercule Poirot has provided me with a full report and evidence. In accordance with the law, I must place Madame Marguerite Delacroix under arrest for theft and attempted poisoning. However, given the circumstances, the absence of lasting harm to Miss Claiborne and Madame Delacroix's immediate confession, I have arranged for her to be remanded to local custody, pending a private hearing, avoiding needless public scandal. Murmur of approval swept the room. Marguerite's shoulders relaxed as the inspector bowed and departed with his charges. She turned to Lady Beaumont, voice quavering. I am indebted to your mercy, madam. Lady Beaumont rose and approached her former friend. Marguerite, I cannot condone your methods, but I understand your passion. I will write to the magistrate on your behalf, attesting to your character and remorse. She took Marguerite's hand. May your penance be as transformative as your art. Marguerite's eyes glistened with tears of gratitude. Violet stepped forward. Marguerite, if you wish, I will accompany you during your confinement. Friendship endures beyond errors. Marguerite nodded slowly. Thank you, Violet. Your kindness means more than you know. Sir Lionel cleared his throat. Mother, Violet, may I escort Marguerite to the station? Lady Beaumont smiled. Yes, Lionel. She will need familiar support. As Marguerite prepared to go, Emerson approached Poirot. Monsieur, you have my deepest respect. How did you know to pursue the ebony dust rather than the more sensational? Clues? Poirot's moustaches twitched in a small smile. Mon ami, the smallest detail often carries the greatest weight. I simply followed the path that others dismissed as insignificant. Emerson nodded thoughtfully. A lesson in humility and attention to truth. A lesson I shall not soon forget. The library door closed softly behind Marguerite and her escort. The remaining company settled again. Poirot stoked the fire, its glow like embers of reflection. "Mes amis," he said, "we have seen justice served, yet mercy shown. Now comes the final reckoning. How do we as individuals reconcile the events of these days with our own consciences and lives?" Lady Beaumont spoke first. "I confess, I feared that my family's honour would be sullied beyond repair. Yet, through forgiveness, I find our bonds strengthened, not diminished." Violet added, "I learned that even the closest friendships can conceal hidden motives. But I also learned that trust, when tempered by understanding, can heal profound wounds." She looked to Sir Lionel. "And I am reassured that our own future may be built on honesty." Sir Lionel took Violet's hand. "Yes, my dear. I vow never to let you face danger alone." Emerson cleared his throat gently. "I too have seen that order alone does not prevent chaos. One must temper prudence with empathy, or risk becoming a silent accomplice to cruelty." Poirot nodded approvingly. "Well said. And Hastings, mon brave Hastings, what lessons do you draw?" I closed my notebook, reflecting on our journey. I learned that a mystery unfolds not merely through puzzles, but through the study of hearts. Justice demands truth, yet truth demands compassion. Without both, we achieve nothing but hollow victory. Poirot placed a hand on my shoulder. "Bravissimo! You have been the witness and recorder of these events. May your observations guide of many such inquiries in the future." The clock chimed 10 as the final chords of contemplation faded into comfortable silence. Lady Beaumont rose and extinguished the lamps, leaving only the fire's glow. "Let us retire," she said softly. "Tomorrow shall bring fresh light to our lives." One by one, the guests bowed and departed, leaving Poirot and me alone before the hearth. He extinguished the fire's last flicker with a gentle wave of his hand. "Hastings," he said, "this case has proven a symphony of psychology and precision. Let us return to London, where I shall record our findings for posterity." I nodded. "And the shadowed necklace?" Poirot smiled as he donned his coat. That exquisite relic returns to Lady Beaumont's safe, to slumber until the next occasion, but its tale shall endure, as testament to the power of the little grey cells and the human heart." We left the library side by side, footsteps echoing down the corridor. In the stillness of Beaumont Manor, at last restored, justice and mercy walked hand in hand, an outcome worthy of the grandest mysteries. Thus ends the penultimate chapter of this affair of the shadowed necklace. The final reflection awaits in the closing chapter, where Poirot's parting words illuminate the enduring truths beneath every crime. Chapter 18. The Closing Remark. Morning light filtered softly through the tall windows of Beaumont Manor, gilding the mahogany wainscoting with a gentle glow. The household stirred with quiet industry. Servants prepared breakfast in the sunlit kitchen. Gardeners tended the dew-kissed rose beds, and in the vestibule, motor cars awaited departure. Only one figure remained by the fireside in the great hall. Hercule Poirot, seated in his favourite leather armchair, legs crossed, moustaches immaculately waxed, eyes reflecting a faraway amusement. I entered, having retrieved my notebook and pen in anticipation of his final reflections. Lady Beaumont awaited us in the drawing-room, a look of serene gratitude upon her face. Violet sat nearby, cradling a porcelain teacup, while Sir Lionel conferred quietly with Mr. Emerson. Even Marguerite Delacroix, now under the gentle oversight of a sympathetic housekeeper, paused in her departure to offer a humble nod. The atmosphere was one of reconciliation and renewal. Poirot rose gracefully as I approached. "Ah, mon ami, you are punctual as always." He patted the arm of his chair. "Come, let us share a final pot of tea. There is much to reflect upon before we leave." We took our places at a small table, the silver teapot gleaming between us. Poirot poured with care, first for me, then for himself, then added a single sugar cube, which he stirred 3 times clockwise, as was his custom. The steam rose in delicate spirals, and he inhaled the scent of bergamot with a satisfied hum. "Now, Hastings," he began, "we have seen how a simple, perfect jewel became the centre of ambition, fear, artistry, and deception. But beyond the puzzle, there lies the human element. What did you observe most keenly?" I considered a moment. I saw how a desire for beauty can blind even the most cultured mind to the suffering it may cause, and how, conversely, compassion can heal wounds deeper than steel. Poirot nodded. "Très bien. For in every crime lies a contradiction. The criminal seeks to control through chaos, yet craves recognition, an audience for their private drama. When the drama unfolds, it is only empathy and understanding that can restore order." He leaned forward, tapping his cane gently. "Remember the lavender powder, the sugar bowl's subtle taint, the ebony dust hidden in a chip, and the linseed oil's faint gleam. These minutiae are the language of truth, spoken when human words fail." He smiled. "Yet the greatest clue is always the human heart, its tremors, its silences, its impulses." At that moment, Lady Beaumont entered bearing a silver tray of scones and jam. She placed it between us, her eyes warm. "Monsieur Poirot, we shall never thank you adequately for the wisdom and kindness you have shown. Beaumont Manor would be a different place, but for your intervention." Poirot inclined his head with graceful humility. "Madame, it has been my honour. Your forgiveness of Madame Delacroix and your compassion toward all parties are the true triumphs of this affair. Without such hearts as yours, justice would be a hollow edict." He took a scone, spread a delicate layer of raspberry conserve, and tasted it with evident pleasure. Exquisite. Even the simplest pleasures remind us of life's sweetness after the bitterness of betrayal. Violet entered then, her cheeks rosy with renewed health. "Monsieur Poirot, I wanted to say that I return to Paris next month to continue my studies. But I carry with me the lessons I learned here about trust, caution, and the power of friendship." She curtsied slightly. "Thank you." Poirot's eyes shone kindly. "Mademoiselle, I foresee you will enchant every audience with both your music and your integrity. Continue to let your art and your heart guide you." Sir Lionel and Emerson came forward to bid their farewells. Lionel pressed Poirot's hand with genuine warmth, while Emerson offered a firm bow. Each expressed profound gratitude, acknowledging how the affair had tempered their own perspectives on ambition and empathy. As the guests departed one by one, Poirot rose and clasped his cane. The drawing-room emptied until only he and I remained. He glanced around at the restored furniture, The grand piano now silent and dignified, the display stand once again cradling precious heirlooms. The late morning sun made patterns upon the oriental carpet. Mon cher Hastings, behold the quiet after the storm. Poirot observed, it reminds us that truth and justice require both patience and precision. We must listen to the voices of subtlety and to the symphony of human nature. I smiled. And you, Poirot, are the greatest conductor of that symphony. He chuckled softly, a sound like a gentle bell. Ah, merci. But now it is time for me to move on. Adventure awaits on the train to London. He reached into his coat pocket and produced a neatly folded invitation from Lady Beaumont, a promise that Beaumont Manor was always his home. They ask for me to return next season, for a recital and a reunion. I shall think of that as I travel. He turned toward the door, his silhouette poised and composed. Hastings, there is one final touch. He tapped the floor near the piano with the tip of his cane, and from beneath a loose board he extracted a small silver key, the key to the safe where the shadowed necklace resides. Lady Beaumont insisted I keep it as a token, lest the heirloom fade from memory. I took the key from him, its cool weight emblematic of justice preserved. I will return it when next we meet, Poirot. He beamed. Exactly so. Until then, may you continue to observe the minutiae that speak volumes, and may the little grey cells ever guide your path. With that, he donned his hat and overcoat, the brim casting a playful shadow over his eyes. I followed him to the front door, where Lady Beaumont waited to see us off. Handshakes and polite farewells ensued, and then we descended the steps to the awaiting motor car. As the engine roared to life, I settled beside Poirot. He leaned back, eyes serene. Through the open window came a last glimpse of Beaumont Manor, the tall windows, the rose gardens, the promise of stories yet untold. He turned to me with a satisfied nod. Mon ami, we have completed the greatest mystery of the season. Now, on to London, where new enigmas await. I closed my notebook, heart brimming with admiration. Very good, Monsieur Poirot. Beamed with that, the motor car rolled away, carrying us toward the horizon, and toward the next grand adventure of Hercule Poirot, the master of human nature's hidden truths.